From the beginning of my research on reported living hominoids, it has been my desire to bring forth the truth about the Bigfoot or Sasquatch, which I became most certain dwelled here in our remote mountains and woodlands of Tennessee. My first thoughts about what the Bigfoot were and what I have since discovered them to actually be has changed dramatically in the last 2 years. Perhaps by sharing Janice Carter Coy's observations on their behavior in their own habitat, a skeptical world can be awakened to the surety of their existence. Her grandfather, Robert Carter Sr., is the true hero and driving force behind this book. He succeeded in habituating a male Bigfoot and others of its kind in East Tennessee for about 50 years. In 1997, I authored a website and I called it Tennessee Bigfoot Lady. My purpose in doing so was to capture sighting reports about wildmen, as they are sometimes called by observers, who often label such hominids with a variety of different names. As a result, I frequently receive mail from those who have experienced close encounters with such beings. On January 2, 2002, I received a Bigfoot sighting report from Janice Carter Coy. Although her lengthy letter was well executed, I read it with mixed emotions. Janice came across as an intelligent and articulate young lady, but was she telling the truth? Did she actually interact with a Bigfoot during some portion of her life, and did she have first-hand knowledge about them? Had her grandfather, Robert Carter Sr., actually been able to tame the Bigfoot, and successfully communicate and interact with them as she claimed? Janice introduced herself to me in her letter as living in East Tennessee. She told me that she had previously submitted a report to another organization, but she wished to submit her report to me as well. What interested Janice the most about the Tennessee website was a lengthy report that she read there from a lady in another state who also grew up under similar circumstances. This report mentioned methods like those that Janice's grandfather once used to make friends with a male Bigfoot. According to Janice, her involvement with the Bigfoot has continued for almost 30 years. However, her grandfather's interactions with them exceeded hers, as Robert Carter Sr. had been secretly habituating these animals at least 20 years prior to Janice's first knowledge. This was a known fact only by his wife, his son, and several of their closest neighbors. Only when Janice was old enough to follow her grandfather's every step did she become actively involved with the Bigfoot, and she was 8 years old at the time. My curiosity was totally piqued after reading Janice's report, describing how she ran into the back of a male Bigfoot's knee while taking water to her grandfather. He was picking blackberries on the backside of their property, and he had sent her to the house to bring back fresh drinking water. I called Janice that same night, and we talked at length about her grandfather. I also learned a few things about the Bigfoot that she grew up around during our conversation. Janice described to me in detail the back of the knee incident. She also told about the part her grandfather played in soothing the situation over. It also came to my attention during our phone conversation that Janice, at the time, had no certain knowledge of how long her grandfather was aware that the Bigfoot had been living and sheltering on the farm's premises. She did mention that she once thought her grandfather was taking table scraps to feed the cats at the barn. Later, Robert Sr. told Janice that he was taking the food to feed his pet fox, but he also at one time told Lila, Janice's younger sister, something a bit different. He told her that he was taking food to the barn to feed his dogs. Janice believes that her grandfather started feeding his Bigfoot, who he named Fox, at the estimated age of 2 or 3 years old. Fox's age was determined from Lilia Carter, her grandmother, and her uncle, Robert Carter Jr.'s memories. Nevertheless, Robert Sr.'s feeding of the Bigfoot eventually habituated them to him. It also began a chronicle of historic events that are unrivaled in any previous accounts of a human befriending a Bigfoot. I do think it is extremely important to introduce some claims in this case that will truly astound many. Janice has related to me that the Bigfoot her grandfather habituated learned to speak many words in English. Fox, starting when he was 2 to 3 years old, had been taught some English by Robert Sr. While reports of Bigfoot using human words exist, they are extremely rare. It seems that they are capable of what sounds like speech and vocalize in a certain gibberish-type fashion, using an accelerated form of fast chatter according to Janice. Janice has also said that the Bigfoot made a gurgling sound when they speak English words. She claims to have learned as a child, over a period of time, to speak their words, and also use them to communicate with the Bigfoot. She also did not learn how to do so without the help of her grandfather. Janice's grandmother said that Robert Sr. spent years teaching Fox and his family how to communicate in English. Janice wrote down some of the more common Bigfoot words beginning at the age of 8 that she learned into a small pocket-sized notebook that her grandfather had bought for her. She says that if she heard one of the Bigfoots use the word that she didn't understand or didn't recognize, she would learn to say it, repeat it to her grandfather, and then ask his help in learning the definition of it. He would then help her to spell it, which she listed in her notebook. She claims to have recorded over 500 such words, and a portion of them are listed in one of Janice's chapters. She has also recorded an audio tape, in my presence, over 200 of these words on a CD, which you may or may not have purchased along with this book. I cannot say with any certainty that these words are in truth what she proclaims them to be, but it is extremely interesting, and further research may prove her right. She is hoping that Fox will allow her to record him while he's speaking, or possibly even videotape him while he's doing so. This may take as many years as it did for Janice's grandfather to be able to earn Fox's trust in order for her to accomplish this goal. I believe that these years are just not available to Janice, as according to her, Fox is clearly showing signs of advanced age. Grandmother Carter and Robert Jr. have each made specific claims that Fox was injured when a tree fell on him when he was 2 to 3 years old. Robert Sr. and a neighbor were clearing a field when the accident occurred. Evidently, Fox was hiding when a tree fell on him. Fox received some cuts, and Robert Sr. brought him inside the house for treatment. Upon recuperating, Fox wrecked the house, and then was taken to a stall inside the barn and locked inside. Once it was determined that he was not a human, Robert Sr. did inquire first of the neighbors, to make certain that Fox was not a deformed human child abandoned in the woods by his parents. It was only a couple of nights later that Fox's parents arrived on the scene and tore the barn door down and removed planks from the stall in order to free Fox. Shortly thereafter, Fox began following Robert Sr. around, and after Fox's parents disappeared one day, the friendship between them developed more rapidly. Grandmother Carter reports that her husband spent more time at the barn than at the house, trying to teach Fox to speak English. Later on, she says that her husband also taught Fox's children how to speak some English too. Suffice it to say that this was how such an unusual friendship began in the first place, between a human and a hominoid of unknown origin. I'm certain that neither Janice nor her grandfather ever thought their loyalty to a family of Bigfoot and caring for their needs, the protection that they offered them, would ever result in this book. Janice has at last decided to make an attempt to tell the world what her grandfather has accomplished. What she has learned growing up around the Bigfoot, and what her grandmother taught her about communicating with them, is of paramount importance if we are to make the public aware of the Bigfoot's needs now and in the future. If we can make a profound difference, instead of allowing ourselves to be told that they cannot exist, then it's time that we listen to those who have seen them and are brave enough to speak up in a world fraught with extreme skepticism. We need to listen to those rare individuals who report their close encounters with the Bigfoot, as I'm certain there are many such eyewitnesses throughout the world. There are also countless others who are afraid to speak up about what they have seen because of their fear of being ridiculed. It has taken a lot of courage for Janice, along with her sister Lila, to present what they know beyond a shadow of a doubt about the Bigfoot. I commend them for this effort. As Janice plainly stated to me shortly after I met her, she had much to tell, and no one to tell it to until now. Those of us who have seen these creatures must do as Janice and her family has succeeded in doing. We all must learn to overcome our fears of being ridiculed, and begin to speak openly and honestly of what we know, before people are able to accept that there may be more to this creature than first thought. In these forthcoming chapters, Janice and I will describe what type of creature the Bigfoot actually is. On January 3rd, 2002, I received an email from both Janice and Lila. They had also sent a few photographs of the Carter farm, as they wished to show me how heavily forested it was in the earlier years. It did help to see these photographs, but it was later, when I met with Janice and Lila in East Tennessee, that I understood what they were trying to convey. The entire farm consisted of rolling hillsides. There were trees and heavy brush on each side of the deep ditch lines and along the tops of the 2 creek beds that ran through some of their mountain acres. The red clay banks of the creeks were quite high and steep, cut deeply by the water flow over the years. These means of traveling throughout the farm, so well concealed, afforded the Bigfoot easy access to the barn, house, and then later on to the mobile homes, sheds, and other outbuildings. One such ditch line ran right below a high spot, where the farmhouse sat on a steep rise. The basement entrance to the house was just a few yards away from this ditch line. It was a most convenient network of hidden gullies, providing easy travel lanes for any type of animal, but most fortunate roadways for the Bigfoot. While looking for photographs to send me of the farm, Janice and Lila discovered a couple of amazing things. They noted that one photograph, taken of Lila's cat sleeping on their clothes dryer when she was 15, had a large, black, upright, man-like creature striding along the tree line at the back of the field. I asked Lila and Janice about the possibility that this bipedal figure in the photograph could be a cow or horse, or another large creature, before I bothered requesting that an enlargement be done. They replied that they did have Holsteins that were black and white on the farm sometimes, until her grandfather died. The sister also said that they had a black stud horse too, but couldn't remember if they owned this horse at the time that the photograph was taken. Janice did confirm that all of their horses were usually kept in the barn lot, so they wouldn't eat the cow's food. Neither woman believed that the figure was of a cow or horse, but did agree it was possible that the stud horse might have gotten out on occasion. Next, I decided to gather up a research team to investigate the farm. Janice sounded confident while relating her facts and seemed to be telling the truth. So at this point in time, I told Janice that when we were ready to start investigations on their property, that we had a right to protect ourselves if needed. Janice informed us back that she could not guarantee that the Bigfoot would not challenge us or harm us in some way. Actually, I was a bit concerned, because the old male had known the Carters since 1947 when they first moved onto the property. We were concerned that he might become aggressive with strangers probing into his favorite hiding places. It was also true that the Carter family had not been spending a lot of time living on the farm since Robert Sr. died. Janice told us that Robert Jr. was living in a mobile home next to the old house, but she also said he preferred sleeping in a motel in town. She explained that this was due to the Bigfoot's habit of visiting him late at night, an occurrence that truly frightened him, because according to him, the Bigfoot could only be controlled by his father, who was no longer there to protect him. Robert Jr. called the Bigfoot werewolves. He thought they looked like werewolves because he had seen their elongated eye teeth. Yet Janice said that their eye teeth did not protrude outside of their mouths. Robert Jr. made it very plain to Janice that he was not on such friendly terms with the Bigfoot, at least not in the way that Janice has been. The next two photographs were also very interesting. In both, with virtually the same camera angle, Janice told me that she could see a male Bigfoot standing in the trees, hiding in the shadows, with the female on his right nearby. This female, as Janice explained, was called Sheba and was Fox's chosen mate for life. She has never seen Fox with another female, nor Sheba with another male. In fact, she had once witnessed another male fighting Fox for Sheba. After studying these photographs, which were pictures of two family members, one shot of each standing at the side of their car, I told Janice that I believed she and Lila were right. I could also see two dark forms in each photograph in the woods directly behind the vehicle. Even though I could only make out portions of Fox, I could see Sheba much better. The pink quilt that she held to her was sticking out like a sore thumb. This is what clued Janice and Lila into taking a second look at the photographs to begin with, the bright pink color showing against the green wooded background. Janice's grandfather had given this quilt to Sheba because he had learned she liked blankets and quilts to lie on, but he mainly gave gifts to the Bigfoot because he cared for them and was concerned for their comfort. Sheba clung to this quilt for several years, Janice says, until it was in tatters, its bright color giving away the female's hiding places at times. Janice seemed to find it most amusing that Sheba thought herself well hidden when she was not. After seeing these pictures, I was willing to consider that Fox and Sheba were at one time closely watching the Carters from the woods near their home. They are old color photographs and were taken at least 16 to 17 years ago, suffering a bit of color fading since that time, but they are still presentable photographs. By now, Janice and I were talking on the telephone quite frequently. I had mainly questions to ask her, and she had questions for me too. At no time in Janice's emails to me, or in our conversations to this day, did she cross up when providing the details that she related about her case. The more questions that I asked, the more I began to sense that Janice was desirous to trust me with more private and personal information than she had already given. I was guessing that maybe she was afraid of what I would think of her if she told me the intimate details of what she knew too quickly. I tried to reassure her and let Janice and Lila both know that I was not going to call them liars, as it had happened to them in the past, nor belittle any of the information that they may choose to give me. It's not a perfect world, and it is sad that the first researcher that contacted Janice was not a very tactful man. Later on in the investigation, it was obvious that Lila had less involvement with the Bigfoot while growing up than Janice did. Lila was aware, however, that her sister probably knew much more than she was willing to tell, and therefore had persisted over the course of several years in asking Janice to report on their situation. Janice did let it be known to me that it didn't really matter to her what others thought of her credibility in the beginning, in spite of her fear of not being believed. What she did seem to be the most passionate about was her grandfather's credibility and reputation. From my own observations at that time, I believed that Lila knew Janice's involvement with the Bigfoot had gone far beyond her own. This has been proven to be true. Lila told me in later conversations that she hadn't experienced the Bigfoot as intimately as Janice, nor had she actually played with the Bigfoot young or even touched them, as Janice related to me that she had done so on various occasions through her years of interactions with them. On the other hand, Janice felt like Lila had mentally shut out a lot of her exposure to the Bigfoot when younger. Janice also recalled incidents where Lila was present when the Bigfoot were also present, yet Lila said she didn't remember those particular encounters. Janice related that her grandfather never encouraged Lila as he did her when it came to helping out at the barn and feeding or caring for the livestock. In fact, at times, Lila told me during the course of our interviews that her grandfather had sent her to the house even when she did tag along to the barn, especially when the livestock were acting up. Both Janice and Lila made it clear that Janice was the daredevil of the two. She was the one that was encouraged by her grandfather to fear nothing, and to perform feats that only an older child would do. He never allowed Janice to give up. If she fell off her horse, he made her get back on. He taught her to drive a dangerously big farm tractor by putting blocks on the pedals, taping her feet to them in order for her to operate it. Janice confesses that she was up to the task because she believed herself to be a true tomboy, and more daring than most boys her age. Wherever her grandfather was, you would also find Janice. Therefore, she learned about his compassion for animals, and worshipfully followed him while he taught her his ways about what he knew of the farm's livestock. It's no wonder then that Janice, with her grandfather as her hero, became deeply involved with Fox and Sheba herself. Bigfoot researchers have to be exceptionally cautious about persons who try to perpetuate a hoax. Each researcher has their own way of determining who is not telling the truth. By studying hundreds of reports and finding multiple similarities in them, researchers can say this certain trait or event happened here, but it also happened over here and so forth. So when we hear the same things repeated persistently in numerous Bigfoot sighting reports, we are more likely to believe those who report the same behavioral patterns in the Bigfoot creature, and Janice was hitting all cylinders, so to speak. Often what she reported had already previously been reported by others who have repeated contact with other Bigfoot in other parts of the world. Therefore, I personally think that the importance of what Janice knows about the Bigfoot, and the proof she is providing and continues to provide, would be a loss to Bigfoot research in general if it was not presented in proper form. This book is not a scientific presentation, but it is a most determined effort in strict honesty. Ongoing investigations may soon provide more physical proof that will be necessary to validate the material contained within this book.
Welcome to Bigfoot Case Files.
Even before we could start our investigations, I was seeking all pertinent information the Carter family members were able to provide on the Bigfoot they had seen or interacted with. I also needed to compare, individually, what each of the girls had to say. If there was any discrepancies, it would be too obvious in their reports. Just the opposite would be true if no discrepancies were found, as this would simply strengthen their case and add considerably to their believability. I can think of no better way to help the reader become acquainted with the two girls' personalities than by allowing you to read their responses to my request. I also felt strongly that their written contributions would place the reader a bit more intimately into their lives. Regardless of Janice's and Lila's experiences with the Bigfoot, they have grown up on a farm where work came first and play later, where each had to pull their own weight. Janice's account is as follows. Grandpapa, Us, and Bigfoot, January 10th, 2002. I was 7 years old the first time I remember a creature of the likes of Bigfoot ever existing. From that time forward, I have had many experiences with them, for lack of a better description, an ape-like human-looking animal. I don't know whether you would call my exposure to them luck or misfortune. Before I tell my story, I would like to include an essay that I wrote in college as a tribute to my grandfather. This will give a better understanding of the way I felt about him and the way he was to me. This is a paper that I received a grade on in college, and just for information purposes, I came out of college with a 4.0 average that I maintained throughout the courses I took there. I made the dean's and president's list for each semester I attended. My reason for including this is to prove that I'm not a stark raving lunatic, a person who sees creatures that don't exist. Here is the tribute as is and in its original form. The person who influenced me the most. Of all the people, from movie stars to teachers and common acquaintances, I have had the pleasure of knowing and seeing, I would say my grandfather Carter has influenced me the most. My grandfather was a man that ruled with an iron fist. He worked hard, yet took the time to enjoy life and give praise where it was earned. A lot of my ideas, the way I think, were influenced by the way he acted and the way he taught me. In his expectations that he had for me, he never criticized me once, even if I fell short of them. Papa, as I called him, taught me at a very young age to stand on my own 2 feet, and if defeated, to pick myself up and try again. To rely upon myself before relying on anyone else was something that he taught me. He also taught me respect, not only for others, but for myself too. Although sometimes I feel it has gotten me more into trouble than it was worth. Papa taught me to stand up for myself, my beliefs, values, and ideas. The man has showed me how to run a home, budget, be inventive, and survive no matter how hard things get. Thanks to Papa, I can manage home and family and provide food on the table, even if it is wild game and wild vegetables, turn a nickel, do many odd jobs, and survive. My Papa never told me that he loved me until I was 21 when I left the state. I moved to a remote little town in upstate New York called Middle Grove. My grandfather just always had a way about him that let me know that he loved me anyways. Papa passed away this last October 13th, 1996, at the age of 90. He lived just long enough to see his great-great-granddaughter born. I sincerely miss him, and long sometimes for his advice and understanding. I know he is somewhere, still looking out for me, and I can still hear his voice when I am in need. Originally written April 7th, 1997. We were around 7 and 3 at the time, and I'm the eldest of the 2 of us. I remember that we were looking across the ditch line, where we dumped our garbage, and seeing a thing's face in the tree line that looked like a monkey. We called our mom outside and showed it to her. She then called my grandparents and uncle out to take a look. This thing could not have been 30 feet away from us. I don't remember any details except the face at the time, but my sister remembers some of the body showing. Mom kept saying, look everyone, it's a giant monkey behind the tree over there. We all saw it. My papa finally said it was just the way the light was shining in the trees, and dismissed it. This thing never moved a muscle, nor did it blink an eye that I can remember the whole time that we were staring at it. The next day, we went back to see if we could see this unusual tree again, and no monkey face was there, nor when we decided to go explore the exact tree and climb it, did it have a face anywhere on the bark or branch of this tree. It was never seen there in that particular spot again, as best as I can remember, although many times we did feel its presence just watching us from across the ditch line after this episode. Along about late June or July of 1972, my papa and I were in the back acre picking blackberries. We always carried a water jug with us as we picked, but for some reason it was empty, and Papa decided I should run back to the house to fill it. I skedaddled back to the house and was returning with the full jug at a dead run to where I had left Papa. I could clearly see him through some trees and underbrush up ahead of me, and then wham, a big tree moved into my path. At least, I took it for a tree at first. I hit it in the back of the knee area. This thing did whirl with lightning speed and backed off a couple of feet. It was a male Bigfoot. At the time, I didn't realize it was a male, but I do so now. This thing scared me so bad that I screamed and nothing came out. I wet and messed my jeans. I was so frightened. I tried to scream and move several times with no results. I was frozen stiff. I must have made some kind of noise or something finally, because Pawpaw did come to me and get between me and it after what seems to me now and seemed to me then an eternity. It had a staring match with Pawpaw at the time. Pawpaw just kept saying it in a voice that he always used to calm our young horses with. "Easy, big boy. Take it easy." For me to back up, and then said again, "Easy," and some other things that he said, but I can't remember now. Pawpaw just kept talking in this soothing type way, and staring at the Bigfoot in a meaningful sort of way. Fox turned and walked off, looking behind himself at us, until he could no longer be seen as he moved in behind the trees and brush. Pawpaw brought me back to the house after Fox left, and Granny helped me get changed. We did go pick more blackberries that same evening. We sold the blackberries for extra money back then, and someone had to pay for them in advance, so we had to fill that order by the next morning. We continued picking blackberries on top of the hill, away from the old barn where I encountered Fox, and hit him in the back of the knee earlier that evening. Fox may have come from or went to this barn after he left us that day. I have had nightmares for years of this particular incident. I can still wake up in a cold sweat. I still have trouble sleeping at night, and God forbid anyone turn the light out on me. I sleep with a bright light on somewhere in the house at night, and I probably always will. Not that it's going to do me any good, should one of these things decide that they are going to come at me, but I at least will see it coming, I hope. And yes, folks, they can enter the best-built house should they desire to do so. At the time, this male Bigfoot was covered in dried red clay mud. He was around 7 to 7.5 feet tall, but at the time he seemed to be taller to me. He has features like a man, and in the face, he looks like a prehistoric man, except for a second ridge around the head above the first and under the hairline. This is a very hard image to draw if you are an artist. The head is not coned on our Bigfoot. Fox and his mate Sheba and his family are all the same appearance except for variations, just like any human or other animals are. No two people look exactly the same, and no two Bigfoot look exactly the same, although there may be a family resemblance. Since I have talked to others, I have learned how to access the web and have viewed and read some of the Bigfoot accounts, but as of this time, I have not viewed a picture that would even remotely resemble our Bigfoot in its human appearance. There are 3 to 4 inches of hair on the males at adulthood. The female's hair is slightly shorter. Young are born naked, with a light dusting of hair, and it thickens in a few weeks. The body of a male is covered with hair, except the palm of the hand, the sole of the foot, the private part, and of course the face. They have human-looking ears, but these are usually hidden under the hair on their heads. The female has thinner hair on the face area and the breast. The genital area is covered in hair on the female, and it does not show like the male's privates do. The females and the young have brown eyes, and Fox has striking blue eyes, which I am told is very unusual, like a dog's or a horse's eyes. Not much white of the eye can be seen. They have teeth like ours, only larger, and the canines are longer than ours and sharp. I have observed them using their teeth to rip and tear meat off of animals that they kill, and also, they use them to crack nuts. Someone asked me about them using tools to crack nuts with. They do this too, and they do use their teeth on the less hard ones. Their hands are like humans, and they use their thumbs like we do. All of the Bigfoot that we saw had 5 toes, but the little toe is carried at an angle, or placed at an angle above and atop the next one to it, so this may be the reason that the little toe does not show up in a print. They are able to stand up as straight as a human, and seem to move about in this manner. They also travel on all 4s, and use their hands or the knuckles of them to walk in this position. They are exceedingly fast either way they choose to travel. They can be extremely quiet, or exceptionally loud when moving. If they don't want you to know they are there, you won't. They have cunning, and they know how to use it. Be careful if you should run up on one, or have it run up on you. They use tools of rocks, logs, or sticks, and use their hands and fingers to dig with. They also use grass blades to get some kind of bug out of its hole in the ground. I don't know the name of this bug, but they also use rocks and clubs as weapons too. They are very apt to throw things at you if you get in their territory too close and they don't like it. They have tremendous strength and agility for their size. They are not sluggish by any means. They are able to think, or seem to be able to think, in much the same way that we humans do. They are protective of their family members. They do show affection towards each other. I never witnessed Fox striking Sheba or the young within the same family group. Fox did, however, lightly push Sheba and tried to lead her along. He did roar, for lack of a better word for it, at her if she did something he didn't care for, or as a warning to get the move on it. They groom each other, but not like monkeys or baboons. They are extremely gentle when it comes to their young. At least, this is the way they always appeared to be to me. After the blackberry picking incident, it was a while before I took notice of these animals being around. In the fall of that year, my papa took me to the top of one of the hills on our place to see Fox and Sheba, the one female, and she had 2 babies, twins with her at the time. Papa had been sneaking a plate of table scraps out to them each evening as he went to the barn to milk the cows. He told us that he had a pet fox at the barn that he was feeding. One evening, after he finished milking, he asked me if I wanted to see his fox. I had gone to the barn with him when he went to milk and do up the chores. Well, being the kid that I was, of course, I wanted to see the fox, pet it too if he would let me. We went up under the old oak tree, and Papa had told me the entire walk up not to be scared of what I was going to see. I just thought this was nonsense, as I was not scared of any animal or fox at the time. When we got to the top of the hill and to the tree, there was no fox there, just this really big something or another under the tree. There was another one on the ground, with its back lying to me on my grandmother's pink patchwork quilt that Papa said he was going to use for the horses. The female was on the blanket. She had it sort of wadded up under her shoulder and head. The male stood up and approached us. Papa sat the plate of food or table scraps on the ground and talked to Fox in a gentle tone of voice and told him to come eat. Papa backed away from the plate several feet so Fox would come and eat. He came and squatted down and picked up the food with his hands and ate every bite. It seems strange now, and I never thought of this until now, but Fox didn't share the food with Sheba at this time. After he ate, he stood up and backed up, and then Papa got the plate and waved bye to him and we left. Fox did not wave back to Papa at this time, but in years later he would. He just made some chirping noises and grunts. I do remember a sickening smell on them. My husband hit on something a couple of weeks ago, so I think I can now describe the smell they have. They sometimes don't give off a smell at all. At other times, it is really strong, and sometimes it is a mild smell. The smell they do give off smells like rotten fruit with wet old dog smell, and earth, and a little skunk thrown in for good measure. Back then, Papa said that I was to tell that these Bigfoot were his fox, and a stray dog he had that was wild and had puppies. They were just always there. I can remember him feeding them nightly for well over 20 years. Years later, Papa got so he just threw the scraps on the ground for them, and they would reach out of the bushes, or from under trees, or out of trees, or just come out in the open to feed. Papa always seemed to know where to find them, and they always knew where to find him. They stripped our fruit trees one year, and Grandma was extremely upset about it. It had been a hard winter the year before, and we always put up fruit and vegetables, and killed and dressed our own meat for the next winter. They raided our food bins and would steal food from our freezer and things like that. They once got in the cellar and broke every jar of food that we had canned. Grandma was ready to kill them and eat them for supper at that time. She said, "Pa, give me that shotgun now. We're going to have those varmints for supper, and it isn't the way you think we are either. I'm going to blow them to kingdom come and dress them out to eat." Well, Papa got her calmed down finally, and she gave up the notion of shooting Bigfoot for eating. I'd hate to have to try and dress one of them out and put it up for eating anyways. I think their meat would be as tough as nails anyhow, like an old rooster's or an old tough bull's meat would be. I can remember them getting into a lot of things they should not have. They are either mischievous or curious about things. They like to explore, like little children. In a way, I think they think it's funny to scare the bejesus out of you, and play hide-and-seek with people too. They are sometimes comical in their behavior. There was one time that my Papa took Fox a pair of overalls to put on. It didn't seem to understand Papa when he demonstrated the way they were to go on. Besides, I really don't think they would have fit him in the first place. Papa did manage to get the male to put on a really big t-shirt one time. I have no idea where he got the shirt from. Maybe Lila remembers. It was huge. The male wore this t-shirt until it was a rag hanging to it around the neck. It was like a big flag on Fox. You could see it even in the dark. The shirt was white and plain with no other writing or colors on it. I don't know if Papa finally cut it off of Fox or not, but it did disappear after a while. Papa took them blankets at times, and I never questioned why he did this, so I don't really know why, unless he thought they were cold. The female carried the first one for over 15 years, a pink quilt, the one she was lying on the first time I saw her. She was carrying it in a picture in the background, taken of a family member in 1986. She carried it for a long while after that too. That would mean she had that pink quilt for around 17 years at that time. In the photograph, it looked like there was not a whole lot of the pink quilt left. I don't know if Papa was ever able to touch the female or not. He did touch the male in later years. He would touch Fox's hand and pet him on the head, sort of like he petted the dogs. Fox learned to accept Papa, as he never hurt him. Fox made noises in his throat that sounded more like they were made in his chest. He could say words in English that Papa taught him, but not like human speech as we know it. The sounds they make when saying words in English are not like the way humans speak. They may be a human or a very intelligent ape. I know I could never kill one unless it was going to kill me. Then I would try to kill it. Note, I say try. It will take a very high-powered rifle or machine gun to do this. They are thick-skinned and very tough. I think you would have to be a dead shot and aim for the eyes, or the abdominal area, or some very tender part. Then, you had better be ready to run, because it might take a while for them to die, and they would kill you if they could get to you. The only time one of them tried to hurt me, or did anything to get me hurt, was the female. Once, when I was a teenager, I was out riding my Morgan horse that weighed about 1,300 pounds at the time. We were running along beside the woods, and all of a sudden, Sheba came out of them and knocked my horse over on its side on my left leg and busted my left kneecap. I still have trouble out of this knee. Sheba was just there, and wham, we were down before I knew what hit us. She didn't let me know she was coming, or that she was going to attack my horse in any way until she did this. She didn't try to hurt me, and she didn't touch me at all. She just slammed the horse over on top of me, then ran back in the trees and was gone from sight before I could say scat or react to stop her attack on my horse. I don't know for sure, but I think maybe she had a little one at this time that she was trying to protect, or something, and maybe we got too close to her baby. She never did anything like this before or since that time. Over the years, Bigfoot did kill some of our cattle, and at least 2 of our colts that I can remember. They break the cattle's hind legs and rip their stomachs open with something. I don't know if it's their hands or not. They do have fingernails, and they also bite them. I do remember them biting their fingernails and their toenails. Anyways, they would rip the stomachs of the cattle that they killed open and lay the innards out on the ground beside the cow at the time. We had always put this type of killing off on devil worshippers or some sicko trying to mutilate our cattle. I know now that it had to be the Bigfoot. I do not know what they took out of the cattle to eat, or if they ate any part of them, because I left right after I watched them make their kill. I could not stand to watch them eat the cattle. I do know they killed and ate our hogs on 2 occasions, and Pawpaw was extremely mad then. They carried off 3 300-pound hogs to eat like they were rag dolls. They did eat a lot of the hogs, except the innards and the heads and feet and bones. They also did kill and eat our goats the same way. We could never keep any goats around. They'd get them every time we bought some goats. They hated our dogs and would kill them, just to kill them, and rip them to pieces if they didn't die immediately from the attack. The dogs would usually hide or run from them, and no amount of beating could get the dogs to go near them. Maybe the dogs had better sense than we did. Bigfoot could have done us the same way they did our dogs if they had wanted to. My papa got sick with cancer in 1994 and had to have an operation that year in August. He was never able to go out and feed the Bigfoot at the top of the hill or the barn again. Fox and Sheba would come to the house from time to time to see him. He would step out of the doors and feed them, or just talk to them, so that they would know he was still there and all right. They got so that they slept under my mom's trailer at times, and I think this was because they wanted to be near my papa. Once after my papa had his second and last operation and had suffered brain damage caused by a stroke, one of them hit the trailer so hard, it left a great big dent in the top corner of the front of it. The blow broke one of the front tie-downs in 2. It knocked the trailer off its blocks in front also. Our uncle would not let us go outside or take papa outside that night, and the Bigfoot howled all night long and kept coming back all night. The next morning, papa did go outside to see what Bigfoot it was. It was Fox, and he seemed to be very sad because papa could not hear Fox or talk plain to him. Papa went deaf with the stroke. Fox kept trying to get papa to follow him, and would take his hand and try to pull papa along. Fox was not mean in doing this. He was very gentle, and he kept talking and even stroked papa's head like he sometimes did in the past. I don't know what Fox was trying to tell him or where he wanted to go with him, but papa kept shaking his head no at Fox and trying to say no. Fox eventually gave up and left. Right after this, papa went to the hospital for the last time. He went into the hospital in September, and he never came home again. For a long time, we did not see these Bigfoot after Fox's attack on the trailer and last meeting with papa. In 1999, I moved back to the farm, and the Bigfoot were still there. I lived there until about 2000, about a year and a half in all. I would catch glimpses of them from time to time. The old male, Fox, was graying up, and the female was not with him the last few times I saw him during this period. Maybe the female died, or she was somewhere hiding. It was not until April 2002 before I saw Fox again. He was a part of my papa to me. I don't want anyone to hunt him or try to hurt him, and I don't want our home invaded by gun-happy Bigfoot hunters. I'm not telling my story for fame or fortune. I'm telling it because it's the truth, and I really would like to know from the researchers what these Bigfoot animals are. I do think I would have to prosecute anyone who hurt the old male fox for murder in the first degree if it happened. He was part of the family, just like anyone's pet companion dog would be. I grew up on the farm and was your typical country girl. I have had experiences with the Bigfoot since I was 3 years old. I have never considered myself to be mentally off or otherwise incapacitated in any way. I am partially deaf, but that is the extent of it. As I said, these experiences started happening when I was 3. The earliest one I remember is seeing this monkey-type creature. There was a ditch line behind our house, and across it began a heavily wooded area with dense undergrowth. My sister and I were playing in the yard to the side of our house when she screamed, "There's a gorilla on the other side of the ditch." We hollered for my mother to come take a look. She looked for a few minutes and hollered for my uncle and grandparents to come out of the house to look. We all stood there, staring at it for about 20 minutes. It never moved, blinked, or anything else. It was standing with one arm leaned against one tree and with its body alongside another tree. After about 20 minutes, my grandfather said it was just the way the light was shining on the tree, and he had us all come inside. The next day, my sister and I went outside to see if we could see the monkey tree again, but we never did. Now let me say a few words about my grandfather. Grandpa was a man that had a way with animals. He always said that if you treated them with respect, they would respect you. He did not care for an animal or human to mistreat its young or peers. If you disrespected him, you could expect to be told about it and put on the straight and narrow. He just had a way with animals, and he could get them to do whatever he wanted. Grandpa was also very secretive in some ways. There were parts of his life that he did not talk about, and there is a period of about 10 years before he met and married my grandmother that we knew nothing about, although every other stage in his life is known. He never talked about this 10-year period, and we knew not to ask. He died at the age of 90, having lived a long and adventuresome life. My grandfather knew these animals were there, but accepted it and never talked about it. He taught me that some things just are, and we were not to question it. He had the Indian idea of getting along with nature and just using what you needed from it. The next time I encountered this creature, I was 4. My sister and our next-door neighbor were friends, and both were around 9 years old when this happened. I was the little sister, and I was considered a pest because I always wanted to be doing what they were doing. They took me into the woods and left me sitting on a log. After a few minutes, I started to hear something walking in a circle around me. I could hear it breaking branches and breathing. At first, I thought that it was my sister and her friend. Then I realized that this was just too big for that. Then I thought that it was a bobcat, but these were occasionally seen in the area. But even then, I knew that a bobcat didn't sound like this. I jumped up and I ran all the way to where my grandfather was talking with the next-door neighbor. This is where our fence lines meet in the fields, next to the creek that was the border in between our properties. Grandpa and the neighbor met there every day to talk about the happenings on the farm and in the community, so I knew that they would be there. When I got to them, Grandpa asked me what was wrong. I told him that Janice and her friend had left me in the woods and that something had chased me out of them. He looked back the way I had come, turned around to our neighbor, and said to him that he would see him later. He ran with me back to the house and bawled them out for taking me into the woods. I still believe to this day that he saw it and knew what had chased me. It wasn't until years later that I realized that what I heard was too loud for any animal that I am now familiar with, such as wildcats, dogs, hogs, cows, horses, and bears. Also, this animal was on 2 legs, not 4. I can remember hearing the footfalls from it, and the breathing was unlike anything I had ever heard before. Janice added the following information regarding Lila's abandonment in the woods. Loretta, Lila, and I were playing over in our old woods, now cut down and cleared into pasture, when I and Loretta decided to go to this little cedar tree that had a robin's nest in it and get the eggs out, or the baby birds. It was eggs at the time, pretty blue eggs. Lila and Loretta would not climb a tree back then to save their skins. I could climb a tree or a greased pole with no problem. I won 3 times at the county fair climbing the greased pole of the Rangers for $100 each time. So I had climbed up to the nest, and I was getting the eggs out of the nest, when I saw Old Fox coming towards us down a cow path in the clearing. I had told Lila to sit on a big fallen tree over in the clearing, while we went and got the eggs, and we would be back for her in a little bit. When I saw Fox coming down the cow path, I jumped down out of the tree, and I told Loretta to run for her life to the house with me as fast as she could. Loretta even asked me about getting Lila when I had already forgotten her, and we were crossing the ditch line behind the house. I just simply forgot about Lila when I said run for our lives to the house to Loretta. I was scared to go back after her, and I was even more scared not to go back after Lila. By the time I came to the decision to try to go back for Lila, I could see Pawpaw coming down the path leading to the creek with her. He called to me and Loretta to hold out there for a minute. He had something to talk to us girls about before we go off again. He gave me and Loretta a big lecture over leaving Lila in the woods by herself, especially when both of us big girls knew what was out there in the woods, and that anything, not just our Bigfoot people, might get her or hurt her, or even carry her off somewhere, and that we would never hear of her ever again, and things like that. He said if we could not do better than that, Loretta was to go home right then, and we were not to play together for a whole week. Loretta left for home, walking, and that was when we noticed Fox behind a lilac bush next to an old plum tree, next to the garage at the side of the front yard. Papa told Loretta to keep on going home as he turned to Fox, who had come around the bush by then, and squatted down on his haunches in front of it. Lila was still squalling her eyes out from being scared so badly, and I was standing at the edge of the bank near the maple tree in the yard. Papa walked down a step or two towards Fox and asked him why he had scared us. I do not know what he said, but he sure didn't mean to scare us. At least, I gathered that much of it. Fox was not talking in English, but Papa was talking what I call Bigfoot words to him. Fox looked right at Lila and said, "You hopped, Papi, I can't weste Mekansky," and pointed to himself and said, "Posa," and then said, "Ka taike to hop wabitub," which sounds like, "Yo o hopped a Papi." And this was also Lila's name they had given her. Her name means yellow hair, and I can't weste Mekansky, which sounds like it is spelled and means be happy little sister. And then, pointing to himself, meaning I or me. Posa means naughty or bad, both or either, depending on what the crime is. And the rest sounds like it is spelled, but with a click on the T at the end of tohopt, meaning don't cry blue eyes. So to place this whole talk of Foxes together, it would be yellow hair, be happy little sister, I naughty or bad, don't cry blue eyes. Lila's eyes were blue when she was little, and her hair was yellow-red, which most call a strawberry red. Papa told Fox to go on, as he had stood up during Fox saying this, and told Fox don't worry about it in English too. So Fox looked over at me when he was leaving and sort of clicked his tongue at me, and made this sound down in his throat that sounds like a grunting sound. I can make the sound myself. It is done without opening the mouth, and it is made in the throat, not the mouth. It is a scolding sound to them, and I would have to do it for someone to understand what it sounds like. I practiced that sound for years, until I had it down pat. Fox went over to the fence, and Papa pushed us both into the house and would not let us back outside for the rest of the day. I had to stay in my room and not come out until supper time. I didn't even get to go to the barn to feed that night with Papa. That is all I can remember of this time, and I don't know why Lila can't remember it. I honestly think Lila does remember it, but she won't admit that she remembers it. Lila can be funny that way sometimes, so there you have it. I was mean, but I did not really mean to be so to Lila that day. I was just so scared without Papa that I ran. I would have left Loretta too, if she had not halfway kept up with me. That is all there was to that day's events. I can remember being in bed at night and seeing what I thought was someone looking in at me. At this time, my window in my bedroom was nearly on the ground and very easy for someone to crawl in and out of. My uncle and one of his buddies used to do this when my grandfather threw them out of the house. We complained about it, and Grandpa raised the window to where it was at least 6 feet off the ground. But there was still someone out there looking in at night, and I could see this thing from about mid-chest up. At the time, I thought this person was wearing a coat and a hat even in the hottest summer, which I couldn't understand. Looking back now, I realized that the hat was actually the brow ridge of this animal. My grandfather used to take us up to the barn to feed what he called a stray dog that was too scared to come to the house and eat with the other dogs. He called this dog Little Sheba. It would bark, but it didn't really sound like any dog I had ever heard, and by this time, we had had at least a dozen dogs. This dog would never show itself, but would hide from us always, or at least while I was along. Where we threw the food was also across a ditch line. On the other side of this ditch was a big tree with branches that came down to the ground. The ditch line itself was also grown up with trees and bushes. Well, this dog had 2 puppies during the time that we were feeding it. One day, when we threw the food out, this arm came out of the branches and snatched the food off the ground. This arm was long, hairy, and ended in a human-like hand. I remember asking Grandpa what it was, and he said it was one of Sheba's pups. I told him right then that wasn't like any dog I had ever seen. He just smiled and took us back to the house. We fed Sheba and her puppies for about 2 to 3 years, from the time I started school until about the 2nd grade. I didn't actually see anything again until I was about 12. There was just some vague memories of things happening and me not knowing why. I can remember hiding in the house with my mother and my sister, and my mother would never tell me why we were hiding. She died in August, so I guess I'll never really know. Grandpa cleared the land off so that the woods wouldn't come right up to the house after Grandma complained about something watching her from the forest. There were times when I would be playing in the yard or the fields and feel like something was watching me too. The hair on the back of my neck would stand up at these times. There were times when Grandpa wouldn't let us go outdoors to play. He would say that there was a bear across the way, but I only saw a bear once in the barnyard, and that was a mother bear with her cubs. These bears, in actuality, according to Janice, were Sheba and her 2 young ones coming towards the house in a quadrupedal position. Around this time, Mom bought a trailer and put it next to the house. The back doors of both were only about 50 feet from each other. There was an old smokehouse in between the two, with some peach trees to the side of it. These peach trees led up to the back steps of the trailer. I remember many a time running by these trees in the dark, thinking something was about to leap out after me. I also remember Mama hitting that back door running a few times too. When I was little, someone told me that when you saw a pile of dirt that looked like an anthill, but with an indentation on the top of it, that was a ghost hill. If you kicked this pile of dirt over, then you had trapped the ghost, and it couldn't come out of the hill which it had its home. Of course, nowadays, I realize that there is a kind of bug that digs down into the ground and creates this, but at the time I believed them. One day, when I was about 12, I was in the carport playing. This carport was about 10 yards down the hill from the house. There was enough room off the road from it to park 2 or 3 vehicles. You then went across the road and up a bank, where there was a wooded area with a lot of undergrowth there. While I was playing, I thought of these ghost hills, and I started to kick them over to keep the ghosts from coming out. There were 2 vehicles in the carport, a Cadillac and a truck. This carport was basically 9 poles, about the size of railroad ties thick, that held up the roof. On either side of the carport, there were wood braces to strengthen the poles, except for the middle 3 poles. Anyway, I was kicking over these ghost hills when I felt like something was watching me. I looked across the road, and I saw this thing that at first I thought was a man. He looked like he was wearing an all-over fursuit. The next thing I thought was, oh no, a monster. I immediately dropped down between the cars, and I rolled underneath the Cadillac. I remember I chose the car because it was lower to the ground than the truck, and I thought that it couldn't get me underneath it, but it could crawl in underneath the truck to get me. I did not see where it went, but I stayed underneath that car until some men came out to the door, and I could hear them talking. When I crawled out, the men were standing in the same general area that the creature was in. I estimated its height with them, and it was a good 2 feet taller than these men were. I ran into the house, and Mom asked what was wrong with me. I never would tell her. I never saw it again after that. I just felt its presence from time to time. My impression of it was that it was a young male, anywhere from 19 to 25 years of age in our maturity, but probably only 10 to 12 in actual years of their maturity. There were times that I felt I would be in danger if I walked through the woods, and I would get that hair on the back of my neck standing up feeling. We built onto the house and made the front porch into a den with only a screen door on it. This door faced the woods, and I would sometimes feel like someone or something was watching me when I was watching television at night by myself. I was always a night owl. This feeling, in time, got to the point where I would sit on the doorframe going into the main part of the house, and I would kind of align myself with the chair that was placed beside it, so that nothing could see me when I was there. We had several horses when I was growing up. We would ride the horses sometimes in the pasture behind the barn. This pasture was bordered on one side by the woods. Sometimes horses would refuse to go near these woods, and I would get that feeling again. Other times, when riding them around the farm, they would refuse to go into certain other areas. No matter how hard you tried, the horses would stop and stand there, or turn and run away from the area. Grandpa had built a pantry in the basement for Grandma, and she used to can stuff and put it in there. She quit canning back sometime in the 50s or 60s, but there was still some stuff in jars when I was a kid. It seems like it was boarded up for a very long time, and us kids tore the boards down so we could make it our clubhouse. Although I don't remember doing this, just the boards were up, and then they were lying on the ground. The first couple of times I went in, the shelves were still up, and the jars were neatly arranged on them. It wasn't long until all of this was broken up, and there was glass everywhere in there, and I know that us kids did not do this. I can remember being very scared of this area of the basement after this. At the age of 16, I was a camp counselor for a church camp. There was a group of people that camped on the other side of the lake that was harassing our camp, and we called them devil worshippers. A lot of things happened that summer, and we always put it off to being them that did it. Looking back, though, some things were out of range of what a person could do. I can remember finding a bare footprint on a dirt road next to our camp. That print wasn't too much bigger than what mine would be. We kept the foodstuffs in a pantry on the porch of the main building, except for the frozen foods that were in a freezer in the kitchen. Someone stole the key at the first of summer, and we found it several weeks later. Because of this, we put a padlock on the door. Something broke this padlock, and our food kept going missing. One night, I was going to the lounge from the main building after getting the kids in bed. I had to walk across a yard to get to it. When you came out of the main building, you were on a cement porch with a roof over it. When you came off the porch, there was a tree about 5 to 10 feet from it that was quite large. After passing the tree, there was nothing between you and the building where we hung out. This building had 2 doors on it. One door faced the road and had a stand in it where we kept the Cokes for the Coke machine, and the candy to sell to the campers. We also had food missing from here. The other door was around the side of the building facing the woods, with a window in the wall next to it. This is where we would all gather and play music and games. After stepping off the porch, I passed under the tree, and almost immediately, I felt like someone was behind me on 2 feet, following every move I made. The only thing I knew for sure was that whoever it was, they were a lot bigger than me. I tried to act casual, as I thought that I would be grabbed if I showed any fear. I walked to the lounge with it following me, until I got to where I had to turn the corner. At the corner, I started running to the door and screaming. When I got inside, everybody asked what was wrong. I told them, and of course, everyone thought that it was the people across the lake and wanted to go after them. I told them not to, and to please stay with me. I felt like it was watching us through the window and was standing just inside the woods. We stayed there for over 2 hours, and when we went to bed, I made everybody leave together and had the guys walk us girls to our dorm. Some of the campers, the boys, claimed one night that something big came into the dorm while they were sleeping. They never got a good look at it. They slept in an old barn that had been renovated. Also, my sister and one of our friends were walking in the woods and found some cattle that had been killed. The cattle's back legs were broken and their stomachs were ripped open. The owner hadn't killed them, we asked, and they were not shot and didn't have any knife wounds that could be seen. Also, these people across the lake picked up and left in the middle of the night one night, and they left a lot of their gear behind, and they never came back for it. On the farm, there was an old abandoned house in the field next to ours. This is where the next-door neighbors had lived before building their house across the creek where the main road was. One day, my mother and sister were walking in the fields, and they heard something scream at them from this old house. They ran back to the house, and Mama said it sounded like a panther, but higher and louder in volume, almost like a woman being murdered, but that no woman could scream that loud. There was an old woman and man, brother and sister, that lived on the other side of the woods that faced our house. They had a cellar where they kept their food, built on the edge of these woods behind their house. I can remember her asking me if I could get her some green beans out of the cellar, and then saying, "Wait a minute, you better let me see if that thing is in there or not first." I refused to go in the cellar then, and my mother went instead. My last real experience I had with them was when I was about 19. My mom had bought a double-wide mobile home by this time, and set it up a bit farther from the house than the first trailer, but was closer to the barn. We didn't have it underpinned at this time. It was the middle of winter, and something kept tearing the ductwork out from under the trailer and laying it where the heat would be coming out underneath on them, instead of going up and into the trailer. This went on for about 2 months. Just about every morning, Mom and I would crawl under there and duct tape it back together. Sometimes we could smell this really raunchy smell. Mom worked thirds, and I was working seconds at the time. I would come in anywhere from 1 to 4 in the morning, and I must have been walking right next to it. Mama kept a little Heinz 57 variety dog in the house, and it would bark down through the registers in the floor, where this was happening, and just generally go nuts. My grandfather and uncle kept insisting that it was the dogs doing it. Mama and I kept telling them that the tape was peeled off and laid to the side in a neat pile. There was never any teeth marks in the tape or in the ductwork that would signify a dog had ripped it off. This went on for about 2 months until I quit working and started going to school full time. Writing this, I remember something I had almost forgotten about. I saw one of the Bigfoot one last time. I married for the first time soon after returning to school, and Mama had my husband underpin the trailer. He left a big door so that we could keep the lawnmower and other tools underneath the trailer. One day, I was going to mow the lawn for them, and I went around to the back of the trailer and I opened the door to get the lawnmower out. I saw what looked like a big pile of brown fur. I ran around to the front of the trailer and told Grandpa, who told me it was probably one of the dogs. The only dogs we had at the time were 2 blue tick hounds and a house dog, which was black. My sister also went down to duct tape the ductwork not long after this, and told Grandpa that she wasn't crawling underneath there either until he got that thing to come out and leave. Grandpa did what Janice asked, and when he came back, he told her everything was okay. My mother bought a single-wide trailer in the spring of '94 and set it up next to the double-wide, with the front doors facing each other. But the single-wide was set down about 50 feet, instead of being even with the double-wide. She had a sliding glass door on it, and this faced the woods across the road. One night, right before she got ready to go to the little trailer, something hit the back end of the big trailer and knocked items off the shelves. My uncle claimed that one of the trucks he kept up in the barn or tool shed had slipped gear and rolled down the hill and hit the trailer. If one of them had, it would have taken off the side of the building they were in, and then rolled about 20 yards to the side of the building first, before being in a line to hit the trailer. The way it was situated, they would have rolled into the ditch line instead. Uncle wouldn't let my mom go out to take a look, and refused to go out himself, even when handed a gun. He also would not let Mom go spend the night in her other trailer. The next morning, she went out to take a look. No truck, no car, no tractor, nothing to account for this happening. She did not look for footprints. Mama got scared to spend the night in the little trailer by herself, and always would stay with Grandpa, Grandma, and her brother in the double-wide trailer. There are other incidents that I can remember that did not happen to my family and me, but to others in the community. I remember one man finding his tractor rolled down a ravine. He did not know how it happened, since the emergency brake was still on and it wasn't out of gear. Other people complained about their animals being killed and not knowing how they were killed. They said that their animals looked like they had been stomped or crushed, but found them back in the woods where a vehicle wouldn't go. There are other instances that I can think of, but I cannot say for certain that they are related to Bigfoot. This has been my life, and I hope you found something of interest in it. I hope that someday one of these creatures will be caught, and we will finally find out what they are. I don't want to hurt them or take away their habitat and lifestyle. They have been here longer than we have, and as long as they leave us in peace, we should leave them in peace. I do know that, although I haven't seen one lately, I can still feel their presence when I walk around the old home place. I am sufficiently afraid of them, and I will not spend the night there, and I always try to leave before dark. I don't know if this is because of everything that happened when I was a child, or because it is the unknown. Probably. It is a little bit of both. I do not want to run up on them by myself or in a group. They may not have ever really tried to hurt us, but they could if they wanted to, and that also scares me. I have kept my children far more sheltered than we were, and they do not know what going out into the woods to play is like. I do not like going camping. This causes conflict with my husband, as he really likes to go camping and wants me and the children to join him. Anymore, I feel as if I'm being watched in the woods. It's like we are observed for a little while, and when they are satisfied that we are not going to bother them, then they will leave. After that, I can relax and enjoy myself, but for the first 2 or 3 hours, I'm a nervous wreck. The terrain around here is very good for hiding them. As a matter of fact, we have had people hide from the law in this area and not be found until they wanted to be found. Thank you for listening. My name is Shannon Morgan, and welcome to Bigfoot Case Files. On January 13th, 2002, 2 Tennessee Bigfoot researchers, Joseph and Stan, traveled to the farm and made an initial investigation. They met with Janice, Janice's husband, Paul, and Lila. They also conducted an on-site investigation of the cabin in another location where ongoing Bigfoot activity was occurring. Sharon, Paul's mother, had owned the cabin for several years and was allowing us to check her place out as well. Joseph and Stan were shown most of the farm, and their reports are included in this chapter. Janice, Paul, Lila, and the rest of their family were hospitable and kind, and they allowed Stan and Joseph to roam freely about the 2 properties in question. A day or two later, Janice sent me a note which truly surprised me. She told me that Stan and Joseph had left out apples and corn on the creek bank at the farm. She believed that at least one of the Bigfoot had gotten them. She had gone to the creek just to see what food, if any, the Bigfoot may have eaten. She found 2 prints of one of their tracks in the mud of the creek bank near the spot where the apples were taken. The part of her note that surprised me the most was the fact that Janice said she was very excited and could jump up and down, knowing that the Bigfoot would still come and take food that was offered. She felt like maybe she was getting over some of her fear of seeing Fox, and she hoped that he remembered her, and also hoped that Fox wouldn't try to hurt her if she began to feed him again. She also wanted Fox to come out where we could all see him on our next investigation of the farm. Janice's elation at finding the apples taken and the tracks left by the Bigfoot was her first sign that Fox may actually still be alive. She had seen Fox a couple of years earlier, but did not visit the farm very often, except to see her uncle on occasion. I don't think she honestly knew if Fox was still alive when she first contacted me. Having Paul, her husband, see the tracks was tremendously encouraging for her, because at the time, he had not seen the Bigfoot, only heard what he thought were sounds made by them. So Janice's sudden anticipation of seeing Fox again was a bit unexpected, or it seemed so to me. In frequent talks with Janice, I had formed an opinion that her past Bigfoot encounters kept her away from the farm. Lila had already stated that she did not visit for long during the day, and not at all during the night. Therefore, from the excitement portrayed in Janice's note, something had changed for her. Possibly the recent support Janice was receiving from others was giving her the incentive to overcome some of her fears. I have seen this happen before, but I must admit that Janice's case is most intense in nature and extremely rare in comparison to the more usual one-time sighting Bigfoot cases. Below is Stan's report after his initial investigation of the Carter farm and the cabin area on January 13, 2002. When Janice said they had cleared some of the farm, they really have cleared it out. The farm is fairly big, but only about 10 acres and the creeks are wooded. Their neighbors have cleared a lot of property also. There are some large wooded lots near the farm, but this and the immediate neighbors' farms are mostly in pasture. I think there is enough cover to mask movement, just not enough to live in, and that's the bad news. The good news is I think Bigfoot are there, but just in passing. The man that runs cows on their property lost around 10 cattle last year, and their neighbors have also lost a few. Janice also told me that some of the dead cows she found, back when her grandfather was still around, were wedged up under trees and she couldn't get them out with her horse. There was something eating corn in the fence row as there were cleaned off corn cobs in the bush beside the cornfield. I think it was a small animal. It looked like each kernel was eaten, rather than something big raking off a lot of corn at once. There was still corn on the middle of the field. The corn had been cut for silage, which leaves a lot on the ground, so whatever it was might still be around. Janice said there was a few places where the fence was in constant need of repair. One of these places was across from an adjoining woodlot going into a cornfield, with a visible trail on the other side of the road. Another was in a gully on the other side of the cornfield, and one other place was on the other side of the house near the creek. We left some apples and cracked corn on the creek, far side of the farm where the cover is. The cabin, in the other research area, has lots and lots of woods behind it. We climbed the ridge behind the house, and there was nothing but woods as far as you could see. The current residents in the cabin, Janice's cousins, have only been there since about Christmas, laughed us off. The man had seen a bear while barbecuing, and is writing everything off to the bear. They heard a scream when they first moved in, and something had gotten into their garbage. I noticed they were burning their garbage out front instead of in the back. They have a young boy, a chicken coop, and 4 dogs. If the Bigfoot are still around, they will be visiting. Janice's mother-in-law also had one Bigfoot come into the living room and slap the walls. After the one came inside, first Janice's brother-in-law, and then her husband Paul, stayed with her mother-in-law until she moved out. Janice and her husband lived there next, until they got tired of the monsters. The house sat empty for about 6 months, and then the cousins moved in. That's about all. We told them if they hear or see anything to call us. Stan. An additional note on the situation at the cabin is the fact that Janice's cousins hastily moved out just a week or so after Joseph and Stan's investigation. The cabin remained empty again until another couple with children moved into it. The new renters eventually started to complain about something beating on the outside of the cabin walls at night. They also told Sharon that they heard bears walking around the cabin at night on occasion. It was discovered shortly afterwards that the new renters had fled without saying a word to Sharon, leaving many of her children's toys and personal belongings behind, just 2 weeks after they had moved in. This family said they were not coming back for their belongings either, so Sharon disposed of them and cleaned up the cabin once more. After this, another family of 4 moved in, and the father paid a considerable amount of money ahead on their lease, and then they too deserted the cabin after a few weeks. This family left much more of their belongings behind than any of the other renters had. Sharon had to search for a while to locate this last family, who were now living in North Carolina. When they were at last contacted, the father refused to go back to the cabin, in spite of the fact that there was numerous boxes of items never even unpacked. There were also new bicycles for the children, and new furniture, along with 2 other vehicles left behind. Sharon made arrangements to rent a U-Haul and deliver their possessions to the father in a certain location. On Tuesday, October 15, 2002, Sharon, along with Janice, met the father with a trailer loaded with all their belongings that they had asked for, but yet they were unwilling to get it for themselves. Speaking to the father, Janice and Sharon again asked him why they had left so suddenly, leaving almost everything they owned behind. He told them that bears had been trying to get inside the cabin. Janice asked him if it was possible that these bears might have been Bigfoot creatures instead, and he insisted that they were not Bigfoot, as he did not believe. He also told Sharon that the bears tried turning the doorknob to get in. I suppose it's possible, but obviously, something very strange is going on at this cabin. Next is Joseph's report after his investigation on January 13th, 2002. I have no problem at all in believing Janice's and Lila's story. They are very sincere and very nice people. The area around the farm has changed quite a bit since the time that the grandfather was feeding these animals. Much land on the farm and other surrounding farms has been cleared. But as Janice states, perhaps they are using the creek bed to travel through this area. As Stan's report states, we did find a fence that Janice said was always in need of repair, that led out to a road with a well-traveled trail that led off into the bush on the other side. Perhaps Stan and I can go back and put up tree stands to see if we can catch them using this trail at night. I just don't see a lot of cover right on the farm for them to still be hiding out there. The cabin is in a very thickly wooded area with cover for as far as the eye can see. The cabin is set up next to a ridge that extends for miles, and any Bigfoot could move very easily for long distances without being seen. The cabin had been vacant for about 6 months before the people that lived there now moved in. Perhaps now that someone will be putting out trash, the Bigfoot will return to rummage through it. A few conclusions. Stan and Joseph properly finished a preliminary investigation of the Carter farm and of the log cabin area in Tennessee, and they found certain signs that suggested Bigfoot activity. This led both investigators to believe that there were strong indications that this area was more than capable of supporting the Bigfoot. Below is a report resulting from a telephone interview I conducted with Sharon, the owner of the cabin, who would rather her last name be kept anonymous. At first, Sharon allowed 2 women to rent the cabin from 1995 until 1997. These 2 reported hearing someone walking around close to the cabin and in the nearby woods many times during their 2-year occupancy. One time, the women had gone to the store, and when they returned, they noticed an unpleasant, strong smell, described as weird, that lingered inside for several hours. Eventually, they moved away, and Sharon and her husband decided to move into the cabin themselves. While living there, the owners also heard sounds of someone walking around outside the cabin. At first, when they would look out, they did not see anyone responsible for making the heavy footstep sounds. They reported these steps as sounding bipedal in nature. During these ongoing incidents, there were times when they would hear voices and walking in the leaves on the hillside by the cabin. These voices were indistinguishable in nature, and they could not be determined what was being said. Sharon's husband yelled outside on several occasions and told the intruders that he didn't know what they were up to, but they had better get gone before he shot them. This never seemed to cause any hurried exit by the frequent trespassers. Eventually, these walking noises and voices would amble off and not be heard again that night. Sometimes Sharon would be alone upstairs in her bedroom and would hear the front door of the cabin open and slam shut immediately afterwards. When she would hear the door opening, she would start downstairs, thinking she had company, and calling out to them to see who it was. But before she could even descend the stairway, she would hear the same thing, the door opening and then slamming shut again. Try as she might, she never saw who was doing this, but the walking sounds again were bipedal, as if a heavy human was walking around downstairs. One time, there was mud left on the carpet in the living room after one of these episodes. Sharon described the large muddy tracks as looking like someone with rags on their feet was walking around. These types of episodes happened on and off at varying times throughout the period of time that Sharon and her husband lived in this cabin. It would also seem that since the cabin is situated at the end of a difficult, steep, rutty dirt road, which requires a 4-wheel drive vehicle to access, that any visitor's vehicle would be heard coming long before its arrival. One incident that did puzzle Sharon concerns a large bowl of fruit she left outside on the front porch. She had placed it there one day during her grandchildren's visit, and had forgotten to bring the bowl and remaining fruit back inside that night. She remembers that there was at least 3 or 4 apples inside the bowl, and at least 2 bananas. In the morning, all that was left in the bowl was 1 apple. She never figured out who or what had taken the fruit. I am certain if a bear was the culprit, the remaining apple would have also been eaten. One evening, Sharon heard what she thought was a bobcat screaming outdoors. Upon looking out, she saw something running through the trees in an upright position. She said she knew it was not an animal, such as a bear, as it was running upright and rather rapidly, like a man would do. She did see it clearly, and it was brownish in color. A few other times, she saw this same type of creature running upright on 2 legs through the woods. Sharon said she moved out of the cabin after these incidents, but that she continues to own it and leases it on occasion to others who want to live in extremely remote areas. Paul and Janice and their children lived in the cabin for a while and also experienced Bigfoot activity. They stayed there longer than some of Sharon's tenants, toughing out a most difficult year with knocking sounds on the outside walls and something lurking in the trees behind the cabin. Another episode that Paul and Janice experienced while living there was when the 2 of them, trying to sleep outside in the summertime inside a tent, were chased inside the cabin one night by a charging, growling creature. They did not see it, but they heard it crashing through the woods with angry guttural cries. Janice had to wake Paul up, and when he heard it coming, he also thought it was best to run inside the cabin and lock the door. Paul thought it was a bear, but Janice's opinion was that it could not have been a bear according to the type of vocalizations it was making. Here are some added comments about the cabin, written by Janice Coy. Paul thinks that his mother Sharon and others were too frightened to stay for long at the cabin. When Sharon's nephew and his girlfriend lived there, they kept saying they were having trouble with what they thought to be a big black bear. They never said it was a Bigfoot, just a bear, and they moved after living there for only 8 weeks. I did talk to Nancy, the one that originally owned the cabin. Nancy said that she had heard the sounds and had problems with something, that she didn't know what it was, back at the cabin when it was first built. Nancy is a reliable, decent, and credible person who doesn't lie. Nancy, Sharon, and myself had something get after us that we thought was a black bear when we walked the property before the cabin was built. We were trying to decide the best spot to build it on. We were walking with 6 dogs and 12 goats that had gone along with us. Suddenly, the dogs turned tail and went flying back to the cabin. Those goats nearly chased us off the mountainside. They gathered around us and kept puffing and grunting and butting us to get out of there. I was the first one to notice the noise that sounded like something following us. I told the other 2 women to stop talking, and then something behind me, very near, made a funny grunting sound like a huff. It was a strange sound for being a bear. I swear that all the hair all over me stood straight up. I leaned forward, and I whispered into Sharon's ear, and I asked her if she heard the same thing. She said yes. She then asked Nancy, and Nancy said yes, she had heard it too. I said it sounds like maybe a bear, and the other 2 agreed at the time. We came off that mountain in a fast-walking manner. We didn't even go towards the old cabin that Sharon lived in at the time. The cabin was down from the cabin that she now owns. We just made a beeline for the road and came straight down off the mountain and onto the road. Whatever that was at the time was walking on 2 feet and not 4. It would take steps when we did, and if we all stopped to see if we could hear it, it would stop also. It followed us to the road, and it never did come out of the woods while we were going back to the cabin. John, Sharon's husband at the time, and Paul's stepdad, or dad as he calls him, tracked it afterwards. He found 2 footprints in the red clay dirt where it had crossed one little part of the dirt road that led to the house from one side to the other. He even commented at the time that this bear was acting really strange, because it was walking on its hind legs all the way off the mountain. He also said that it must have been really after us and preparing to attack because it had remained on its hind feet. I did see one of the tracks at the time, and that was not a bear track. It had 5 toes. It was a medium-sized track, however, about 10 inches from the toe to heel, and about 5 to 6 inches across the heel. At the time, seeing that track gave me the heebie-jeebies. I just knew it was not a bear, but a young Bigfoot. Still, Nancy did say she had trouble out of something while living there, and she called it a swamp ape, and some other name that I'm not sure of. Nancy is from Florida, and they call Bigfoot something else down there. Paul reports that his mother Sharon was in her car at one time after dark, parked outside of the cabin when something got after her. She first claimed she didn't know what in the world was attacking her car. She simply stated it was some kind of big hairy animal, but could not tell the family exactly what it was. Paul also said that his mother's car looked as if a bear had been at it, and after he told her this, that was when his mother started telling others that it was a bear that attacked her car. Later, she changed her mind again and thought it might be a mountain lion. It wasn't until very recently, after I showed my mother-in-law pictures of a Bigfoot on my computer, that she believed the creature that got after her actually was a Bigfoot type of animal. So now Sharon is pretty certain that what was attacking her car was a Bigfoot. Sharon didn't know what a Bigfoot was, or what they really looked like before I had shown her a picture. Paul said that his mother did indeed have something attack her car that night, and that maybe she didn't really know what type of animal it was. It's likely that Sharon didn't know what a Bigfoot was in the first place. All I know for sure is that the car was beaten in and heavily damaged when I saw it the next day. Janice Coy, March 2002. Some of my final thoughts about Janice at this time was that she was trying to be as brutally honest as she could with me. I felt that she was exhibiting a true love-hate relationship towards the Bigfoot on the farm, which I believe came from early childhood involvement with such frightening creatures. Of course, I am not a psychiatrist, nor anyone who could give an educated opinion in this matter. The Bigfoot were fascinating monsters that were extremely kind to her most of the time, with the one exception of Sheba, who attacked Janice's horse while she was riding near the woods. I also thought Janice might have a need, or at least for a long while, to put everything concerning the Bigfoot behind her in order to cope with the normal everyday life. Janice did proclaim to me that she had been avoiding close contact with Fox in recent years, due to a fear of these creatures, since she had moved away from the farm and since her grandfather's death. The same holds true for Lila. Lila stated in no uncertain terms her feelings about the Bigfoot, and that she did not intend to place herself or her children in any more danger from them. She does not trust them at all, and her fear seems deeper rooted somehow. It remains to be seen whether Lila changes her mind in the future. Lila told me that she had persistently urged Janice to report what she knew about the Bigfoot, which eventually toppled Janice's memories of them into one heap of mental anguish. It seems that again, Janice was trying to understand just exactly what these creatures are, ape or man. I say again, because she has been told by her grandfather what he believed them to be, but she was never thoroughly satisfied with his explanation, it seems. Janice was told that the Bigfoot were people just like she was, only they looked different and were much bigger. Knowing the Bigfoot had a way of communicating with each other by their own use of certain signals and vocalizations. Janice could not help but think that her grandfather might be right. After all, from what her uncle and grandmother Carter told her, her grandfather was able to communicate with them, even before she came to live with them on the farm. Janice, when a child, watched from high above in either of two trees as the Bigfoot killed livestock in a most gruesome way. She watched as they killed her pet goats, chickens, cats, dogs, and other farm animals at times. On the other hand, she had seen the gentleness displayed between Fox and Sheba and their offspring, and how they related to each other in a peaceful fashion. Janice reports that they never hit each other or tried to harm each other as human husbands and wives sometimes do. When Janice would believe that the Bigfoot were gentle in nature, the next thing she knew, they were killing her dogs and cats. I'm certain that will always be a perpetual circle of mixed emotions for her, while she tries to figure out just what these Bigfoot truly are. However, Janice is no different from others who find themselves in the same predicament as she, seeing man-like creatures that exhibit extremely intelligent behavior, yet look like a cross between an ape and a human. When I visit with Janice or talk to her on the phone, she reveals that she thinks the Bigfoot are people, and then the next time we talk, she thinks the Bigfoot are dangerous huge brutes, capable of injuring her or her children. She repeats over and over at times how easily they can kill with just one swipe of their strong arms and hands, or how they can throw a bucket-sized rock with deadly accuracy. She knows too well what they are capable of, and finds it most difficult to believe that she spent her childhood trying to play with some of their babies, especially Blackie, the surviving male twin who was born in 1973. It hurts me to watch Janice's efforts to sort things out concerning the Bigfoot. Are they a human race of people with a gene that makes them giants with excessive hair? Or are they a long-lost great ape, or maybe some other special hominid creature that we've yet to discover? Are they Neanderthal in nature, or maybe a genetic split-off? Why has no one been able to produce a live or even dead specimen, or at least a skeleton of just one Bigfoot? Janice has now put herself into a position of being forced to prove to a most skeptical world that these creatures survive in Tennessee. She does know that few will ever believe the Bigfoot exist just on her word alone. Even though her grandmother and uncle have provided some information, others in the family, friends, and neighbors are most reluctant to bring forth what they also know. They are working behind the scenes in helping Janice to document her statements and helping her to get necessary physical proof to go along with her claims. One neighbor has even held off building a new home near the property because he is afraid it will run the Bigfoot away before Janice can obtain all the physical proof that she needs. Having some education in the veterinary field, Janice does know what it's going to take to present proper physical proof of Bigfoot's existence, and once obtained, drop it into the laps of skeptical scientists. She knows that it may take years, or maybe even the rest of her life, to produce certain and unquestionable physical evidence for DNA testing. Will she and others in the neighborhood succeed in their efforts? I hope so. Currently in Tennessee and in North Carolina, we have an excellent team of investigators who are doing their best to aid Janice with the right advice and equipment necessary to prove her case. More recently, Will Duncan has become involved and has provided video equipment for this project, and I am truly thankful for his assistance. Will and his friend and associate, Dmitry Bayanov, have invaluable experience to add of their own. Janice and I are truly humbled by their offers of help and advice, which have been taken to heart. Along with Will and Dmitry, Henner Fahrenbach has given staunch advice when needed. He has also been a blessing to this project. Most Bigfoot researchers today would say that the Bigfoot are capable of talking or mimicking human speech. To do so would set them apart from the rest of the more serious researchers, who look upon the Bigfoot as a giant ape that is dangerous or quite peaceful, depending on the part of the country that you live in. The Pacific Northwest Bigfoot researchers seem to believe that the Bigfoot are gentle giants, but some of the southern Bigfoot researchers believe that the creatures are quite aggressive and capable of killing you if given the chance. There does seem to be a very large number of aggressive encounters reported to researchers in the South compared to the more benign encounters in the Pacific Northwest. Dr. Grover Krantz, a Washington State physical anthropologist, whose teachings and research covered all aspects of human evolution, advocated, up until the time of his death on February 14, 2002, that according to various indicators, the Bigfoot might have come from a primate called Gigantopithecus, which is perhaps not extinct after all. Gigantopithecus was a contemporary of Homo erectus, and they lived 1.8 million to 100,000 years ago. Gigantopithecus was essentially a very large ape, likely related to modern orangutans, but it was said to have stood from 6 feet tall females to 9 feet tall males, and weighing from 600 to 1,200 pounds. Gigantopithecus officially became extinct around 300,000 years ago, but some Chinese scientists believe that a form of the beast exists as the so-called Yeti or abominable snowman. Others believe another form of Gigantopithecus exists in the northwest United States and is called Bigfoot. Dr. Krantz never saw a Bigfoot, although he was not afraid to speak out on behalf of its existence. For someone in his position, this was considered a dangerous and foolhardy thing to do. It has been said that doing so cost him professional credibility. Dr. Krantz was also dearly loved and spoken well of by most Bigfoot researchers. They appreciated his efforts to prove its existence. Dr. Krantz strongly believed that Bigfoot did exist, and he was featured in several Bigfoot film documentaries over the years. On February 4th, 2002, another field trip to the Carter farm was undertaken. While in Janice's territory, we conducted 2 lengthy interviews on both Janice and Lila and a systematic examination of their property. The weather was bitterly cold. The temperature outside hovered below 20 degrees Fahrenheit the 2 days that we were there. We planned on staying longer than the 2 days, but a snowstorm was forecast and moving in on us the last morning, so we had a limited time to accomplish our objectives. The first night's interview with Janice and Lila lasted over 5 hours, and the next night, an interview with Janice alone lasted even longer. The second day, we took a good look at the farm, but we did not go to the cabin to search there again. We simply had to be content to concentrate on the Carter farm alone. My personal observations were a bit different than Stan's and Joseph's first analysis of the land features of the farm. As I've mentioned before in earlier chapters, I saw the rolling foothills of the Smoky Mountains, with the deep, jagged ditch lines and heavy tree cover along these gullies and creeks as an ideal hideaway for the Bigfoot. They could travel freely at any time of the day or night in these gullies and waterways without ever having to be seen by humans. It was true that large amounts of tree cover in prior years was gone, and that formerly wooded areas had been cleared for pasture. Still, wide paths with dirt showing through trodden, worn grass were in evidence. Large creatures were using these paths. Found also were additional paths leading across the main road or off onto neighboring farm woodlands that also appeared to be well traveled. Strands of barbed wire on the fences were pushed down and in need of repair at the time that we were there. Janice claims that these places on the fences, where the paths lead up to, are in constant need of repair. Even though barbed wire is strung taut when replaced, a day or two later, the wire is again bent downwards or broken in the same locations. This has gone on for as long as she can remember. It appears that the Bigfoot are using the same trails and have not made any effort to change their patterns. I did think while looking around the farm that it was unlikely that the Bigfoot felt as comfortable and as sheltered in more recent years, with so much of the land cleared. I also thought that the cave entrances along the creeks held a lot of interest for them. The deep-bedded creeks offered seclusion, travelways, water, and food sources. The insides of the caves are decently warm in the winter, cool in the summer, and offer shelter and protection from all weather conditions. Caves have long since been necessary for survival for several types of hominids, and are often an absolute necessity for other types of wildlife and their survival. I do realize that the Bigfoot are not as free today to browse the Carter farm for food as they once were during the daylight hours. There simply isn't enough cover left for the Bigfoot to hide as in years past. It bothers Janice that so much clearing has gone on in the recent years, not just on their farm, but the neighboring farmers are clearing off their land too. Janice once watched the Bigfoot family from her treetop during the day, where there was only a small dirt path leading to the couple of houses. Now the road has been paved and a few newcomers are buying land and building homes nearby. Because of Janice's respect and love for her grandfather, and the respect he in turn showed for the Bigfoot, she has refused to clear her portion of the property. She has allowed the trees, bushes, and weeds to grow in order to provide shelter for the Bigfoot. Since a portion of her land lies along the creek, I feel the cover remaining there has been an extremely vital and crucial necessity for the well-being of Fox and the remainder of his family that still roam the farm. So even though Janice proclaims that she is horribly afraid of the Bigfoot now, she is evidently concerned that they be allowed what shelter she can provide for them, and the Bigfoot are still there. After the late night of interviews on February 4th with Janice and Lila, our team asked Janice to meet us at the local newspaper office in the morning. We spent several hours looking through archives of certain articles of interest concerning our case of Bigfoot's existence in the area. When we finished at the last newspaper office, we went back to the motel and rested. We had not gotten much sleep the night before. Janice returned home, but she and Lila were coming back in a couple of hours. They were going to go with us to the farm for further investigations. Joseph Bell, Anonymous, Janice, Lila, and myself looked for signs of the Bigfoot's presence when we reached the farm in the afternoon. We were shown the deep ditch line behind the barn and the horse shed where Robert Carter Sr. had fed Fox and his family for over 20 years. The old tree is still standing, but its limbs are a few feet higher off the ground than they once were. This tree is rooted in the ditch line, and that is why the lower limbs were so close to the ground when the Bigfoot were fed there by Robert Sr. As Janice told us, the Bigfoot could actually sit or stand under the lowest branches at the top of the ditch, and then reach out and grab the food poured out to them. Janice said that Fox and later Sheba came out in the open to get the food if Janice and her pawpaw were the only 2 humans there at the time. If the other Carter family members were there, the Bigfoot would stay hidden while they were eating. Fox was always the first to eat and had his choice of the offerings. Then Sheba would eat what he left, and so on down the line from the oldest to the youngest. Janice stated that the babies rarely got any food due to this order of feeding that Fox imposed upon the other family members. The only exception to this rule was when they were fed M&M candies. Each Bigfoot were then given a few M&Ms, poured from the bag directly onto their hands by Robert Sr. Fox was forced to share, or he would not have gotten any at all. Still, in their normal feeding habits away from the barn, Janice says that she never saw such a pecking order, that all shared in an animal kill or food find. The mother of the clan, Sheba, was said to eat constantly, even with a young one in her arms that she rarely let go of. After looking around the farm for a while, searching for tracks, hair, feces, or other physical evidence, Janice and Joseph searched an area where Janice had watched the entire Bigfoot family bury Sheba's stillborn baby in 1977. Video was taken of this area and the exact spot of the burial, as Janice was very sure where she had seen them dig the large hole to put the baby in. Other video footage and photographs were taken of the house, trailer, barn, fields, fences, and other land features before we went on to investigate the creek. Our visit during the coldest weather of the winter caused a few difficulties. Lila had not dressed warmly enough, wearing only a thin coat without a hat or gloves. At least, Janice had on a thick warm coat, but she also did not have on a hat or gloves. Our team members were a bit concerned that Lila was getting too cold. We didn't wish to make her sick or cause her any frostbite. Therefore, we did not look around as long or as much as we would otherwise have done at the barn, other buildings and dwellings, or in the ditch lines. Next, we drove to a small group field up above the creek, where Joseph and Stan had left apples and corn out on their first visit a few weeks earlier. This is where Janice was going to make an effort to call Fox up. She felt like she could do so, and wanted us to view him as closely as possible. She explained that she was going to use the same type of calls that her grandfather had used over the years when calling the Bigfoot up for food or at other special times when he needed to talk to them. This calling up for a talk was generally done when something Fox had done was particularly upsetting to Janice's grandfather. Janice said he called them in when Fox would start killing the livestock. She told me once that even though Fox would huff and be angry with her papa because he told him to leave the livestock alone, Fox never really challenged her grandfather's authority in this manner. Yet a few weeks would go by, and Fox would again be chasing the goats or eyeing the cattle as food. A total of at least 60 goats were slaughtered by Fox and his family over a 20-year period, according to Janice. She was allergic to regular milk, and therefore, the need of the grandparents to replace the goats as they were taken. This averages out to about 3 goats per year, so that's not too bad, considering the appetites of such large creatures. However, the neighbors' cattle, hogs, goats, and chickens were slaughtered at times, in impressive numbers and often on the same night. The kills in neighboring cattle herds were reported by the cattle owners as the work of coyotes or other types of large predatory animals. In discussing this with Janice, she explained that she hesitated to tell the other farmers what she suspected was killing their livestock. She didn't think she would be believed anyways. This past winter, Janice told us that some of the farmers were truly up in arms about the situation, and were debating about hunting out and shooting whatever was killing their cattle, but they were never successful in any of their efforts to locate the source of the predator. I'm sure Janice breathed a sigh of relief that Fox was not caught and killed for taking others' livestock, if indeed he was the guilty party. Janice let it be known that only one of the recent cattle kills could reliably be assumed to be the work of the Bigfoot. She states that she cannot vouch for any of the other cattle were killed by a Bigfoot, because she did not witness the Bigfoot actually doing it. I appreciate Janice's honest statements in this manner. It proves that her grandfather taught her the meaning of the word integrity. It also says to me that she was taught the principles of honesty as a child, because Janice did not actually watch Fox or another Bigfoot capture and kill any of the cattle. She was not going to state that it actually was a Bigfoot that killed them. The killing of the cattle began in December of 2001, then other kills happened in January, again in March, with the last episode happening in April of 2002. One of the cattle that was pastured under a rental agreement on the Carter farm went missing without a trace. Its carcass was never found. Then a close neighbor had one cow that was reported by Janice to us as being more than likely killed by the Bigfoot. She bases this mostly on the way the cow was killed, and the fact that this young cow had only its liver taken. This is what Janice had witnessed twice as a child. The Bigfoot killed the cow by breaking its neck, then sliced the stomach open, then took something from inside to eat. She cannot be certain it was the liver that the Bigfoot were after on the 2 cows that she watched them kill, as she did not stay around to see what they were eating. The remains were simply wasted, and her grandfather had to burn the carcasses. A neighbor later reported 3 more of his young cattle had been killed in the same fashion. Janice states that she did not see the last 3 kills, as she was not living there at the time. Also, before the winter was over, a man whose property is behind the Carter farm reported 2 of his half-grown cattle were killed in the most disturbing fashion. The slaughter of all of these cattle happened during the winter of 2001 to 2002, and they were all killed in an unusual manner, according to reports from the neighbors. I think Grandpa Carter may have kept many of the neighbors' cattle from being harvested simply for their livers by feeding Fox's family for over 20 years. It appears to me that the other farmers would owe Mr. Carter a deep debt of gratitude for saving so much of their livelihood. I lived on a farm for well over half of my life, and I know that the loss of even 1 cow can be devastating. In most states, they are not cheap animals to purchase. Once we were in the overgrown field above the creek, Janice appeared to be visibly shaken. Her voice quivered and her body shook, but I thought that possibly this was from the cold and not from fright. Lila was also a bit agitated and looked nervously around. Janice pointed to where she planned to call Fox out and brought a beautiful new quilt that she wanted to give him. I don't know if this was because of the winter weather or if it was a peace offering of some sort, renewing their friendship in a strange sort of way. I was taken aback by the beauty of the quilt and its newness. Surely, she was not going to give this gorgeous new quilt to a creature such as a Bigfoot to wallow in. How wrong I was. I asked Janice about offering this quilt to Fox, and she replied, "Well, Fox is a friend, and was my grandfather's friend. I could offer him no less. We always give our best to our friends." Needless to say, I felt a bit ashamed. I had not thought of the Bigfoot as being very human until that moment. It struck home that Janice did feel the Bigfoot were humans of some sort, and because she believed this so strongly, nothing was too good for Fox. With that said, Janice walked towards a grove of trees, which included some bushy cedar trees at the end of the field. There was heavy tree cover there, and she had told me that is where Fox would come out from, if he was going to. She wanted to give Fox some decent cover up to a certain point. He would not have too many steps to go in order to pick up the quilt. I thought this was a well thought out plan, where Fox might not come out into an open area. He may very well take a few steps and grab the quilt before making a quick exit. It also proved to me that Janice knew what she was doing with Fox and wanted a successful effort. Next, Janice and Joseph went to the creek to see if there were any tracks or any other signs around the place on the lower bank where they had been feeding Fox the apples. Anonymous took a large bag of popcorn, heavily salted, to the area where the quilt was laid on the ground in the field in front of the thick cedar trees. Anonymous put the bag far to the right of the quilt, and it was our offering to Fox that day. Janice seemed a bit unnerved at this point, and told us all that she was going to try calling Fox in, so it was clear that she wanted us back beside her, near the center of the field, but rather far away from the quilt itself. We all complied, and by this time, Janice was shaking quite noticeably. I still could not determine if it was from the fear or the cold. Once we had cameras and bionic ear equipment at the ready, and also recording equipment set up near Janice, she had made some extremely loud calls to the Bigfoot. At that time, my video camera stopped recording and showed that the battery had gone dead. It was about 15 or 16 degrees Fahrenheit, late in the afternoon under cloudy, darkened skies. In 1 hour, the sun would set. Although this one video camera battery pack was fully charged when I had started out, I now had to replace it with a reserve one, and I continued taping as Janice made more calls of different varieties, several of which I had not heard before. It was unbelievable at how much Janice sounded like a real Bigfoot at times with some of her shrieks. I was familiar with their calls, and I knew it had taken a lot of practice for her to do them so well. We waited, and all were in readiness to see if Fox would appear to retrieve his new quilt. I continued to videotape until the other battery died in less than 15 minutes with the cold. I was now without a means to record Fox on videotape, even if he did appear. At last, Stan arrived shortly thereafter with his video camera. He had worked the night before, and he had driven down to be with us that evening after catching up on some sleep. I heaved a deep sigh of relief, because none of us had any idea what was going to happen next. About 10 minutes later, Janice was still trying to call Fox in. We had been hearing dogs sounding off in the distance in the direction of the quilt. We didn't know if the dogs were barking at Janice's calls, or an approaching Bigfoot. These dogs most likely lived on a farm behind the creek, but not within our sight. It was then that I saw what appeared to be a very large black figure on the hillside above the cedar thicket. It was coming down the side of the mountain. It was moving in a quadrupedal fashion on all fours and advancing towards the cedar thicket. I clearly heard a loud huff and growl noise. I looked over at Anonymous, who was watching the same spot I was watching most intently. I whispered to her, and I asked her if she had seen the creature, and she agreed that she had. From where I stood, the creature I saw was not a bear. It did not have a long snout that a bear has, and although it moved fluidly, it was out of sight in seconds. Janice continued to call, and in a few minutes, Joseph thought he also had picked up some growls on the bionic ear equipment. Stan told me that he had observed some movement also. Therefore, I asked Stan for a more detailed report about what he had seen and heard while we were there. I am including his observations also. That day on the farm, I remember seeing movement back in the trees. I saw it a couple of times, and I tried to get it on tape. I thought I had taped it, but when I got home and reviewed the tape, nothing. It seems like there was a dark shape where the movement was, but it never moved, and I assumed it was a tree trunk. The movement I saw was just a flicker, not something I could say was a Bigfoot or not. Later that night, I thought I heard a long, loud growl with a bionic ear. It never stopped, and I assumed that it was some interference from the creek. I did hear something that was not the creek. It was a swoosh sound, like a limb makes when a squirrel jumps on it, followed by a limb breaking, and then something hitting the ground. If I was in town, I would have assumed that it was a cat or a raccoon jumping on a limb that broke, and then everything hitting the ground. The only problem was that there was no scampering away noise. In fact, there was no sounds from there, and it came from the spot where we left the apples, not where the quilt was. Joseph had on the bionic ear, and it was pointed the other way, and he didn't hear anything. We waited a while. When nothing else happened, we spotlighted the area and saw nothing. We waited it out for a while before we left. I can't say for sure on the movement, and in this business, if you can't be sure, it seems best to not say anything. Not sure about the growl, although the return trip with the bionic ear might help prove what it was one way or the other. The limb noise, I'm pretty sure, was the big guy. It kind of sounded like he reached out and snatched a limb off a tree real fast. There were trees and the creek bed to hide in. It just had a weird feel to it, when something odd happens that you're not sure is Bigfoot, but you really think it is. As Janice continued her calls, she grew more and more frustrated that Fox did not come out in the open. In fact, she started to cry. She said she was angry with him for not coming out and knew that he was probably there. Janice had no idea that we saw a black creature heading for the cedar thicket behind the pasture where the quilt lay. I did not tell her either. I didn't want her efforts hampered or swayed by telling her that we actually saw something. Lila was beyond cold and looked like she was turning blue, so I asked Joseph to start his truck and let her sit inside to warm up, which he was nice enough to do. I asked Janice if she wanted to warm up also, and at first, she could not be swayed. She squatted once and began beating on a large dead limb with a stick. She was trying so hard to call Fox up that it actually hurt me to watch her efforts. Eventually, though, she had to give in and warm up inside of Anonymous's truck right before we started back to town. Daylight was rapidly fading and the sky was overcast. The temperatures continued to fall. Shortly after Janice's last attempts, all of the women climbed into Anonymous's truck and headed back to the motel, leaving Joseph and Stan to continue their surveillance of the area. Janice drove Lila home and returned alone shortly after supper time. The two men remained in the field next to the creek until after midnight. They then returned to the motel, where they joined me in asking Janice questions about Fox and Sheba that they were most curious about. I can say one thing. None of us were happy to leave the scene, and kept hoping that Fox would at least come out and grab the quilt before retreating. Janice was extremely disappointed that he didn't show, and kept worrying that we would not believe her unless she could prove he was alive and real. My thought during this time was, why should Fox come out in the open in front of so many strangers? He had never displayed himself at the barn unless it was Janice or her grandfather there to feed them. There does exist one other incident where Fox displayed himself to a stranger, but that was a short while before Robert Carter Sr. passed on. Janice has related this incident elsewhere in this book. I did not have any high hopes that Fox would actually walk out and pick up the quilt. This past experience told me that this just could not happen, and it didn't, of course. It took years for Robert Sr. to gain Fox's trust, and none of us that day were going to do in a couple of hours what took a lifetime for him to accomplish. I know that Janice was very hopeful, and I think this is because of her need to have us believe her was so strong. We assured her that these things take time. I felt that if anyone was going to get any videotape of Fox, it would have to be Janice herself. I wasn't too disappointed about what I heard and observed. That huge figure on the hill on all fours still stubbornly clings in my mind and refuses to be dislodged. My name is Shannon Morgan, and welcome to Bigfoot Case Files. Janice had a traumatic face-to-face encounter with Fox in April of 2002. She had gone into the basement below the Carter farmhouse to retrieve a lawnmower for her uncle and unexpectedly found the Bigfoot there. The reason Janice was getting a lawnmower out for her uncle in the first place was because of an event that occurred a week earlier on Monday, April 8th. Robert Jr. had been feeding his small dog at the basement door entrance on the rear of the house. This entrance was near the deep gully that skirted the back of the house. He'd just driven in from the motel to mow the grass and to feed his pup from a newly purchased bag of dry dog food. I had petted the same pup, along with a larger dog, when we investigated the farm in February. Janice had told me a few weeks earlier that the larger dog had been missing for a while. During the last week in June, this pup was later found dead in a ditch by Janice and other Bigfoot researchers during a later investigation of the farm. It is surmised that it was killed by the Bigfoot due to the nature of the injuries that it sustained. Janice knows firsthand how the Bigfoot kill dogs, and she stated, after finding the pup, that she felt like the Bigfoot had most likely killed it. So as Robert Jr. went to feed his pup, he found his basement door standing wide open. He assumed that someone had broken in to steal some of the antiques that he had locked up inside the basement. This was proven true in the next week, as thieves had left the door open in the first place. A large number of antiques worth several $1,000s were stolen. He worried about this at the time, but proceeded to feed his puppy anyways. While he was opening the dog food bag to pour some out into the feeding pan, Fox loomed from the darkness inside the basement and approached Robert Jr. at the open door, and indicated to him that he was hungry. Fox had been given dog food to eat in the past, and it was one of Fox's favorite foods. Shocked and in total terror, Robert Jr. handed the entire bag over to Fox, backed slowly away, and then turned and fled up the hill in front of the house. He told Janice later on that he jumped inside his Jeep and left immediately. After this happened, and without telling anyone where he had gone, Robert Jr. went missing for about a week. I remember well how Janice and Lila were exceedingly worried about him. The sisters scoured the town and went to the motel to ask if anyone had seen him there. The motel clerk said that he had been there on Monday, a few days earlier. The girls were also told that their uncle appeared to be all right. Monday, as they later learned, was the day that Robert Jr. had his startling encounter. The girls, now somewhat comforted and feeling like their uncle was probably all right, discontinued their search and returned to their homes and families. Robert Jr. is in his 50s and is quite capable of taking care of himself, but he had always checked in with them every few days. This time, however, 7 nights and 6 days went by with no further word on his whereabouts. All of the family members grew increasingly alarmed with each passing day. Where had he gone? By the time he called Janice on the telephone the following Sunday evening from another part of Tennessee, Janice and Lila were extremely upset with him for not contacting them any sooner. Janice told me that she and her uncle had the most serious telephone conversation, one that lasted for quite some time. Things were about to change in living arrangements for all of them. Once Robert Jr. was back in town, he talked Janice into going with him to the farm on Tuesday afternoon. He still wanted her to go inside the basement after the lawnmower. He knew she could talk to Fox as his father once did, and he felt that she would have to be the one to try to get the lawnmower out for him, especially if Fox was still using the basement as a temporary shelter. Robert Jr. was much too afraid, it seems, to go near the basement door, even with Janice along to aid in the situation, as Janice's letter explains. On Sunday, April 14th, Uncle called me from Upper State Tennessee to say he was okay, and to relate the incident where he saw Fox in the basement on Monday, April 8th of that of last week. It was the next day after he called me on Tuesday that Uncle came out to the trailer and picked me up, so I would go with him to get the lawnmower out of the basement for him, to feed the dog, and to take a look around. I called Mary Green immediately then, and I told her all about Fox being in the basement when my uncle saw him, and she and Joseph came the very next day on April 17th. We parked in the upper driveway and went down into the basement entrance. I, and not Uncle, went into the basement. That is when I heard heavy breathing coming from the cellar, or that room that Granny used for canned goods. I had climbed around all over the junk, and I call all those bikes, mowers, grills, and bicycles and the like junk in there. I looked over about 2 or 3 feet in front of me at the entrance to the room, and there was Fox, laying facing the far wall, on that mattress thing out of what we now know to be from a truck seat. I started to back up, but for some reason, and I don't know why I didn't back up right then and there anyways, but I hesitated in getting out of there right away, because Fox was making labored breathing sounds. I could clearly see him from the light through the window in the room, or at least I could see the back of his head, and the shoulders, and part of his upper back. I almost let out a blood-curdling scream at first. I, for some reason, asked Fox if he was all right. I honestly thought he was sick, and might have been dying in there on me. He grunted something at first back at me. It wasn't a growl sound. It was then that for some reason, I came to think I had to get him out of the basement at all costs. I have no reasoning at a time like that. I just more or less acted on impulse. I started backing out of the basement door as he started to rise. At least, that is what I took Fox to be starting to do, because my foremost thought was, I didn't want him to trap me in there in one of the far corners of the basement and kill me or something. I am not exaggerating when I say a million thoughts were running through my mind at once, and none of them were sticking around for any length of time. Not to sound mean or anything, but yes, you can bet your sweet hind that I was scared nearly to death. This is because I had not been this close to Fox in years, and I just did not know how he would react to me being that close to him again after all of these years. I know I started to lapse into the tone that my papa always used with him when he wanted Fox to do something, that smooth, easy tone one uses on a skittish colt or in a fighty young spooked horse. I know I was talking the whole time, and Uncle started yelling at me from outside the basement too, and I was scared to raise my voice and answer Uncle for fear that Fox would get mad and rush me in there. I just kept backing up over all that junk, and I almost stumbled over a bicycle. It seemed to me like hours before I could get out of there, when it was more likely only a few minutes at most. I kept telling Fox he needed to come out of the basement, and I said it like this. Fox, old boy, you are going to have to come on out of there. I need to get some things out of here, and so does Uncle, and he's scared of you. I know at first that Fox only grunted at me telling him this, but I just kept repeating it to him. When I could see him coming on all fours, it looked like out of the corner of my eye there at the basement door, I backed up to the side of the house. I then peeked in the window to the cellar room to make sure he was coming out. By then, he was in the main part of the basement when I peeked in the window. I know I said a lot more, but I can't remember every word that I said to him right now. I kept asking him if he was all right, or if he was sick, or if he would please come out of there after a time. I kept saying, Fox, old fellow, if you don't come out of there right soon, I am going to have to come in after you, and you are not going to like it. I kept telling him he needed to come out, and that he was scaring Uncle to death, and he could not stay inside the basement. I told him Papa was dead and gone too, and that Papa was not inside this house anymore. I then told him that Papa was not coming back to live in the house either. I even started to call Papa the Bigfoot name for him, and I also referred to myself as the name that they called me all of those years. While talking to Fox, I started to refer to my name as being Manita, small hand, and Papa being Tunkensaila, grandfather. I also called the name Ara for my Uncle Robert Jr., Ara for uncle. Fox did not answer me at all, and it seemed I was waiting on him forever to come out at the main part of the basement. I could not hear him coming or even breathing at one point. It is beyond me how he made his way out of there without making a sound. Of course, Fox could have been making all types of racket, and my mind was just screaming at me so loud to run, to get out of there and to run, that maybe I didn't hear him. I don't know, because I sure was waging war with my own self on what to do. I don't know why, but I finally did ask him if he was hungry. That is when he came on all fours to the door, just inside the basement. He waited for me to back up to the bathroom side of the cellar wall, and then he came on out and stood up on his feet then. But I swear, he seemed to be shorter than he did when I was little. He never stood back, arching straight, however, so this might have made him look smaller. His hair was graying to black in color now, with a lot of gray in his outer hair coloring, with some white or silver colors in his hair too. He was not as black as the ace of spades like he once was, but a dark gray with a black in it. Well, that old booger's first word was to point at himself and tell me hungry. As for usual, his stomach overruled his brain. He had only grunted at me in what I did not recognize as words up until this point. He looked old and skinny, if he can be skinny, and sort of acted, I think it might have been an act now, sick and feeble. I asked him if he remembered Papa, and he did. He said that Papa was not gone, but that Papa was in his something or other, as I do not remember the word he used. It had to mean the heart or chest, because when he said this, he pointed to his heart, but pointed more between his chest and the middle than to the left side of it. He said he was hungry again and some other things. I said some other things to him also. He said he was hungry a few more times, and Uncle was standing up on the little rise there towards the front of the house. He asked me to ask Fox what he wanted to eat. I had a little disposable camera in my back pocket. I did ask him if I could take a picture of him, and he did indicate that he didn't want me to. I did also tell Fox that he was not to go inside the basement anymore, and to stay out of there. I think I even asked him if he had killed Nikki, Uncle's dog, but I don't think he knew what I was talking about, because I did not say it was the dog, I just used her name. Fox did look sort of puzzled when I asked him that, but he never answered me. It was at about then that Fox had come a step or so closer out of the basement towards me. It was then that I thought I could hurry up and grab my camera from my pocket. I had pushed the flash button on it, and it was blinking red at the top little light there in my pocket. I really thought that I could get a quick shot of him. The instant I reached for the camera in my pocket, he went to all fours. Before I could even get it out and up to my eye, he ran lickety-split down the little bank and jumped over the fence. He had taken off at a dead run over there to the old spring area of the tree line in the field, and I say he jumped the fence because he did jump it and clear it. He half stood, half crouched to jump over the fence, and then landed on all fours and kept going like he did. He did come up to his feet and walked bipedal once he started to enter the woods over there at the spring. And that is also when I noticed, while he was standing before me, that I had been wrong about the pupils of his eyes being like ours are. They are not like ours. They are like a cat's eyes that are slit, and then they get round, but the light makes the slit look like a cat's eyes. Uncle and I went to the huddle house and got all the food, and we brought it back here and placed it on top of the old safe that we have in the front yard. We left and went back to my trailer. I got out, and Uncle went on his way. It was right at about 6 p.m., I think, when I got back home. The interviews conducted with Janice and Lila on February 4th and 5th follow in the next few chapters. Most questions were planned ahead of time in order to lead into desired areas of information, with hopes of maximizing their results. As it turned out, several impromptu questions were necessary, due to many surprising answers during the course of the interview session. Portions of this transcript that were not relevant to the case, but of a more personal nature, are not included except for a few necessary exceptions. The interview follows with needed notes, explanations, and comments interspersed throughout the transcript. February 4th, 2002. Persons in the room during the interview. Mary A. Green, field researcher. Anonymous, field researcher. Janice Carter Coy, first eyewitness. And Lila Carter, second eyewitness. Mary, to Janice and Lila. We were talking earlier about starting on a timeline, such as when you first became aware of the Bigfoot on your grandfather's farm to the present. So to begin, you called your grandfather Papa or Pa? Janice answered, yes, I called him Papa or Pa. Lila also said, I called him Grandpa or Pa. Mary then asked, and his name is Robert Ireland Carter Sr.? Janice replied, yes. Okay, and he was born where? Said Mary. Janice says, Mississippi. Mary then asked, how many children did your grandparents have? Lila replied 2, and Janice replied Mama was the oldest. What was your mother's name? Mary asked. Janice replied Melvina. And the other child? Janice replied, Robert Jr. And your grandparents moved into Tennessee when? Mary said. Janice replied, Grandpa moved here when he was 8 years old, so that would have been 1914. Lila added, Grandma didn't move into Tennessee, though, until she went to college, so she would have been 22. She graduated high school at 21 and stayed at East Tennessee State until next fall. Janice added, I got that diploma where she graduated from high school. She graduated from college in 1930, and then she was allowed to teach. Lila added, so she moved here to Tennessee in 1927. Mary then asked, and then they moved to the farm here. Lila replied, they moved here in 1946. Janice added, they moved into the state earlier. Lila said, Grandpa bought the farm in 1944, but they didn't move onto it until 1946 or 1947. Mary, Janice, so your first sighting of the Bigfoot creature on your grandfather's farm was in June or July of 1972, when you were 7.5 years of age. Janice replied, no, not actually. We had seen it, Lila and me, before. We saw the faces in the trees, and Mom was with us. Mom called it a monkey face. She called Grandpa and Uncle outside, and they kept saying, look at the monkey face. And Grandpa finally said it was just a tree. He said it was just the way the sun was shining on the tree that made it look like it was a monkey's face over in the tree. Lila and I went over there the next day. It wasn't a tree, and it wasn't a face in the tree or on the tree, or the sun shining on the tree that caused it. There had been something standing there in the trees. Lila added, I don't remember seeing an arm at all, but it was like it was leaned up against this tree, with a hand on it just looking at us. Janice added, and it didn't blink, and it didn't move, and we were like from here to Anonymous from it. Anonymous was about 20 feet away at the time. Lila said, yes, that's about right. Mary then asked, who saw this monkey face first? Lila said, actually, Janice saw it first, and she said, there's a big gorilla over there. Janice then added, I was used to seeing Willie B at the zoo in Atlanta, Georgia, and I thought it was Willie B who had come to see me. Mary then asked, so this is the first time you two saw the Bigfoot on your grandfather's farm. Do you know what date that would have been that this happened? Lila said, I was 3, so it would have been 1972. Janice said yes, that was the first time, and the next time would have been when we were picking blackberries. Mary asked, did your grandfather ever say what year these Bigfoot first appeared, or if they were always there on the farm since they had moved there? Lila said he had never mentioned it to me. And Janice said, he never mentioned to me either, but I did ask my uncle. He told me I don't know, but when I was a little boy, one climbed into my bedroom window reaching in. He told me it scared him to death, and the window where he slept was 15 feet off the ground. This window is right over a cellar where they raided it for food on occasion. Mary then asked, was it during the night when the Bigfoot climbed in? Janice said, yes. And back then, our windows went all the way to the ground on the house. Not the ground, but to the floor part of the house, and it climbed in the window. Mary asked, what did your uncle say the Bigfoot did then? Janice replied, it went back out. It went back out the window. Mary asked, did he say whether he screamed out or not? Janice replied, he screamed. His room was right off my grandparents' room. He said it scared him to death, and he screamed. He also said that he thought he was about 10 or 12 years old at the time, Delilah, so that would have put it happening in what year? Lila said he was born in 1944, so that would put the year at about 1954. Janice then continued, and he said that's the first time he ever remembered seeing them, so it's possible they were there before that time. It traumatized him, but according to him, they are not Bigfoot, they are werewolves. Lila added, he says to him they looked like Lon Chaney Jr. did in The Werewolf. Mary then asked, do you know if the Bigfoot, when it climbed in the window, harmed your uncle in any way? Janice replied, he won't talk about it. I don't know what it did to him, but it scared him to death. He doesn't like to talk about it, and he says that everybody thinks he's crazy and he's nuts. He doesn't want to be interviewed by you either. He says that everybody thinks I'm crazy, and they've tried to lock me away for it. He says, I know what happened, but I don't care anymore, because no one will ever believe me. And I said to him, well, I've got somebody that's coming that does believe us. And he says, well, I'm just not going to tell anyone anymore, because they will just put me down. Mary added that maybe in time he will change his mind. We'll just wait and see. Janice replied, he may, because I told him that you were coming, and he said that's perfectly fine. But because he's taken so much ridicule from it, he still doesn't want to be interviewed by you. He said the thing scared him to death, and that he will not stay down there at the farm by himself at all. He said just as long as Pa was alive, Pa could handle them. That's what he called my grandfather, Pa. He said just as long as Pa was alive, he could handle them. But he said when Grandpa died, he said, yeah, Papa was a good person. Lila added, I have often wondered if Grandpa grew up in an area where he had seen these Bigfoot when he was really little, because I've been doing a little bit of research on the question of children's sightings. It seems that if children see them before they are 5 years old, they are not afraid of them, or most children weren't. Janice then added, I wasn't scared when I was little, but I'm petrified now, really. I want Fox to come out and see me, but I'm also very scared now. I'm afraid that I can't control him. I know my grandfather could have controlled him, but I know I have no control over these animals. Even if it's a wild man, it's a wild man, and you hear stories of these children that come out of the wild that just tear you apart if they can get you. Mary then said, so now we were up to 1972, and you and your family have seen a Bigfoot leaning against a tree. Janice says yes, that is when we first saw the monkey in the trees. So here we have reports from both Janice and Lila that they both saw Bigfoot at an early age. Both were with other family members at the time, and although 2 of the eyewitnesses are deceased, it does not make the reports any less credible. Janice was 7 years old, and Lila would have been only 3 when she saw the monkey face. It's a bit surprising that Lila remembers the incident, but her memory, although exciting, was not necessarily threatening in nature. The presence of the entire family during the sighting must have offered emotional support for the children. The girls did check out the area the next day, and came to the conclusion that it was not just a tree that they were seeing with a monkey face, but some other type of phenomena. The grandfather might have very well known it was Fox standing there, and he may have even felt ill at ease that his granddaughters were being watched so intently while they were at play. Since Janice later told me that they were all made to come inside afterwards by Robert Sr., this could have actually been true. I can just imagine the scenario if Fox had all at once decided to move or walk away during that time, that they were all watching him and wondering what he was. We have already established in earlier chapters that Fox fully trusted Robert Sr. and was comfortable around him, and later, with Janice's presence also. Yet it might not be a stretch of the imagination to believe that Fox could have been approached by the family group as a whole. I tend to believe that Fox had unwillingly been discovered and found out by Janice. Perhaps he had been standing there watching out of curiosity, and when he was seen, he could do nothing but stand still in the hopes that he would not be as visible. It's just a matter of conjecture that Robert Sr., at this point in time, may have become concerned over the interest that the Bigfoot were displaying towards Janice and Lila. The girls, when younger, were less likely to wander off too far, and therefore could safely be watched. Now that they were older, their play areas expanded into the woods and ditch lines, at the creek, and other places where the grandfather could not keep as close of a watch on their whereabouts. since I was curious if the two sisters ever talked to each other about their experiences. I asked Janice just how often did they discuss the Bigfoot. Her answer was that she hadn't talked to Lila about them to any great extent until they lived together in South Carolina. Janice claims that they would say something to each other once in a while, but usually just steered clear from discussing the Bigfoot issue. It would seem then that lesser acknowledgement when it came to the Bigfoot, the more comfortable the girls were in conducting their everyday lives. As far as the uncle goes, it is extremely likely that he has been emotionally scarred by what he calls the werewolf that entered his bedroom late one night. He will not allow me to interview him and seems greatly concerned that I will not believe him. Again, we return to the interview for more insight into the sightings of the Bigfoot in prior years. Mary then asked, "Okay, and now the next sighting was when?" Janice said, "I ran into one in either June, late June, or in early July, because our blackberries are ripe, and they had always been ripe at those times. I always helped Papa pick the blackberries." Mary then replied, "We've pretty well documented that already. How long was it after this incident that your grandfather took you to feed Fox?" Janice said, "I would say it was in October, because the leaves had started to fall off the trees, and it was cool and I had a jacket on. It was the first time that Papa took me up on the hill, and Fox and Sheba were there under a tree." Lila added, "Well, it seems like we were wearing dresses that day, and you and Loretta left me over in the woods, Janice, so it was very early spring or late fall, because it wasn't cold enough then for a heavy coat." Janice then said, "It was the next spring that we left you over there," and Lila added, "I was thinking it was the next spring, because I was just 3 when we saw the monkey face." Janice, "We ran off and left Lila in the woods because we heard it. Shame on us." Lila continues, "Left me sitting on a log, 4 years old, and they go running into the house." Mary added, "That would be awful." Janice then said, "Well, I'm going to say this right now. I was horrible to Lila when she was little, because I made her eat bugs and everything." Lila also added, "You also made me eat mud pies," and laughs. "But they left me over there, told me to sit on a log, and they'd be back soon. 15 minutes went by, and they're not back." Mary to Lila, "When did you first become aware that something wasn't right?" Lila said, "I know there was a time that I realized they weren't coming back, that something was there. It was dark in there too. I'd say they weren't gone 5 minutes when I started hearing it. I could hear it walk a couple of steps and then stop, and I could hear it breathing the whole time. And it was just, I can't even begin." Mary asked, "What kind of sound did you hear?" Lila replied, "You know how a man snores at night? A really heavy snoring type sound? The first time I ever spent the night with my first husband, he snored like that, and I came out of bed screaming that one was in the house. He was saying what, and then it hit me. I couldn't tell him that there's a Bigfoot in the house, so I told him there was a grizzly bear in the house, and he told me no, it's just me, go back to sleep. You know, okay, I know I'm sitting there going, I know what that sound was." Mary then asked, "So you have been very traumatized by the Bigfoot creatures?" "Well, I come out of the bed," Lila replied. Mary then continues, "Okay, so you're sitting on the log," and Lila goes, "And I'm hearing it just walk around, and 1 minute it would be in front, and then in like no time, it would be back around and behind me. It was just going around in a circle. I thought at first it was just Janice and Loretta trying to tease me." Janice added, "She was in a little clearing," and Lila replied, "You know, a little clearing with the woods all the way around, and this log was kind of in the middle." Janice added, "Actually, it was an old tree that we had cut down." Lila says, "Well, yes, but it was a log. Whatever was making those sounds wouldn't ever come into the clearing. I would just hear it. There was 2 trails from the clearing, gestures with her hands. One trail went down this way, and one trail came off this way, and they had apparently taken this one. The trail down this way went down to the creek, where Grandpa and the neighbor man Ralph talked every day. I knew Grandpa would be down there, because it was about time that he would be there. I could hear it coming around, and I yelled and I said, 'Janice, cut it out. You aren't being funny, just quit.' The sounds just kept going on, and I just knew I would soon hear the girls giggling. That's what I kept listening for, was giggling, but I never heard that giggle. So I got up, and now I said, 'Quit it, I'm going to tell Grandpa.' But it just kept on, and I took off down this trail towards Grandpa, and I could hear it, staying back behind me. When I got to Grandpa, he says, 'What's the matter with you?' And I said, 'Something is after me.' And then he asked, 'What's after you?' I told him, 'I don't know, Grandpa, there's just something after me.' He then looked up in the woods, and he turned around and said, 'Ralph, I'll see you later.' And he just hit it. Hit means took off in this incident." Mary then asked, "Did you and your grandfather go back down the same trail that you ran to your grandfather on?" Lila replied, "No, there's all kinds of little trails." Mary added, "Do you think that your grandfather knew there was really something after you? Also, do you think he was just getting you to safety?" Lila said, "I think so." Mary then asked, "Did he talk any more to you until you got to the house?" Lila said no, he just grabbed me. He practically drugged me to the house and didn't say another word until we got to the house. Then he grabbed Janice and Loretta and ran after them. He said to them, 'You know better than doing that.' Janice added, "And he gave me a blessing out, because he told me that I knew they were in the woods, and that Loretta knew they were in the woods, and we should not have left her over there, because they might get her and take off with her." Mary asked, "So your grandfather said that he was afraid they might take off with Lila?" Janice replied, "He knew that, and he just blessed me up one side and down the other, but he never did cuss me, he just blessed me out, and left me the word that I had better not run off and leave her there ever again. Of course, I did, but..." Mary to Lila, "Do you have any nightmares after this occurrence? Was that the start of your nightmares you told me you were still having?" Lila said, "Not at that time. I was about 4. I think it was mainly because I didn't see it that time in the woods. I started having nightmares a couple of years later, and by then, we had already started complaining about someone who was looking in the window at us. The picture that I took of our cat on the dryer looks out to the area where our bedroom is, just right on the other side of the wall. At the time, the trees came all the way up to the back of the house. I remember telling Grandpa there was a man looking in at me through the window. Janice had gotten lucky. Her bed was over next to the door. Mine at the time scooted up underneath the window." Janice then added, "I'm going to say something now. Lila knows this, and I always put it down to somebody being dressed up. But when I was 3 years old, it's just like a dream now. But I had awful nightmares and temper tantrums in my sleep. It felt like something. I would be conscious, but it felt like something was holding me down, and I was a slab of concrete, and the Bigfoot were ripping little itty-bitty thin slices, paper-thin slices off of me. That's just the feeling it was, and I couldn't breathe. It would scare me, and finally I would wake up, and I'd come to myself, and I'd scream for my grandparents. But when I was 3, I thought it was somebody that came into the house in a gorilla suit. Now, it may have been that it scared me that bad. Whoever it was, they were in the living room in the middle of the floor, and I always put it off as someone in a gorilla suit, but I'm not positive. I was so little. I did a lot of blacking out of this. I blacked it out for years. I still don't remember the incident very good, but I went and I hid with the dogs in the doghouse. I don't know why I did that." Mary then asked, "Was anybody at home with you at the time, Janice?" Janice replied, "Mama had to have been home, but I don't know where she was. I just remember being on the living room floor. We used to have carpets on the wood floors, and we had a carpet down. One of those square carpet things, and I took dough, and we had an old screen door. I had taken flour and put it down on the edge of the carpet, and I had a little Tonka dump truck. I had the flour mixed with some soap and water, and I had made a lovely mess on that carpet. This thing came in, and I didn't know. I repeat, I didn't know who got it out of the house or what. I went flying out the back door and around. I got in the doghouse with the dogs. That's the only thing I can remember, and like I said, I always thought that it was someone dressed in a monkey suit." Lila then added, "About a year before we saw the one in the tree line, and I could not tell you why we were hiding, but I just have a separate memory of hiding one day. The way the house was set up might help to draw the house. Let's see. This was Uncle's bedroom, and I guess it was like this, because you got the door right here going into it. The bedroom came up this way in behind the bathroom, and then there's another bedroom right here. This is the door to that bathroom, and this was basically the bathroom right here. And then this room was in behind the bathroom, and this was your kitchen, and there's a closet in this hallway. And at one time, this closet was actually not there. Grandpa built it in afterwards. This was Uncle's bedroom from the time he was about 10 years old until he was 15, and then they gave him a different bedroom. Because this was the original front porch right here. Uncle was 10 or 12 when it crawled into his window. So this was the front porch after that, and now it's been closed. I know Mama grabbed us, threw us in the back door that day, threw us through the door and into the kitchen here, through the hallway, stuck us in the closet in behind some stuff, and then she went and hid over here with me. She had Janice over here on the other side of the closet, and Janice was going, 'What's wrong, Mama? What's wrong?' And she would just shush us. 'Don't say anything. Don't say nothing.' And we were in that closet for 2 or 3 hours." Mary then asked, "Do you remember anything moving around or making noises in the house or hear anything at all once you were inside the closet?" Lila said, "It seems like there were noises out in the house for a little while." Janice added, "There was a shaking of the house. I can remember the shaking of the house because of the fact that I was going to get up and come over there to Mama because I was scared. Mama scared me to death hiding us in that closet. It was pitch dark, and I was going to come to her, and she told me to be still. I said, 'The whole house is shaking.' And she told me to shush, sit there and be still, because if you don't, I'm going to wear you out." Lila then added, "We were in there until Grandma and Grandpa came home. I don't know where they were that day. We stayed in the closet until they came home. We heard their voices in the house, moving through the house, before Mama would let us come out. Now that's one of my oldest memories, but I can give you no reason why she did it. I did ask Mama about it before she died, and she said, 'Lila, I can remember hiding in the closet, but I can't tell you why.' I said, 'What do you mean?' And she says, 'I can remember hiding, but I can't remember why we hid.'" Mary then asked, "Maybe she just didn't want you to know why she hid you." And Lila replied, "I wonder." Janice added, "Yeah, she always called them very hairy men." Mary asked, "So what was your mother's word for this creature? A very hairy man?" Lila and Janice both replied yes. "It was never a monkey or an animal. It was a very hairy man with no clothes on." Lila added, "Or if he did have clothes on, she would say it was very tattered clothing, and she didn't know why he bothered to wear it." This refers to a very large white t-shirt that the girl's grandfather had managed to get on Fox. Reportedly, Fox wore the t-shirt until it was in shreds, held on only by the collar of the shirt. The tape recorder was then shut off, but the video camera was left on during a break. When questioning resumes, I asked Janice about the trees she sat in as a child while watching the Bigfoot. "Now these trees that you sat in to watch the Bigfoot, Janice, where were they located?" Janice replied, "The tree that I sat in was near the road. It was in this area right here, and that's the one tree, and the other tree that I used to sit in is over here, near a big walnut tree." "So the first time you decided to climb up in a tree, what year was that?" Janice replied, "It was in, let me think, 1973, because that was the year Sheba had her babies." Mary, "What gave you the idea to climb the tree and watch the Bigfoot back then?" Janice replied, "I climbed the trees all the time, and when I got up there, I could see them." Mary then asked, and which tree was it that you climbed the most often? You mentioned 2 trees where you watched the Bigfoot from in your emails. Janice said, I climbed the one across the road the most often. In which direction were the Bigfoot that you watched from this tree? Janice then said, they were over here in the back field, over in here, points to the sketch of Lila's, and also up here at the top of the hill by the barn. Also, they stayed down here next to the creek in that cave, or above the pine trees. Mary then asked Janice, so can you remember the first time that you actually started to watch them in a serious manner? Janice said, the first time I seriously watched them was when? It was after I played with Blackie, so I was about 10, when I really started watching them very much, because other times, I would just climb up in the tree and I'd say, well, they're doing this, that, and the other, so I wouldn't really pay attention to them. I like to sit up in a tree and sing also. Mary then said to Janice, let's make this easier on you. Please tell something that you thought was amazing that these Bigfoot creatures on your farm did that you watched while you were sitting up in your tree. Just the very first thing that comes to mind. Janice said, they were on the creek bank and they were fishing, and they were putting their hands down in the water and they were throwing the fish. The older one, Fox, he was throwing the fish up on the bank. Mary then asked, and Fox did this with his hands? And Janice replied, he did this with his hands. He was standing in the creek and he would reach down with his hand, and then all of a sudden he would just throw one up on the bank. Mary replied, would the other Bigfoot be on the bank of the creek? And Janice said, the others were on the bank. Sheba and Blackie and his little twin that came up missing were on the bank. They would grab the fish and start eating them. That's one thing that I forgot to tell you before. They don't gut the fish. They just swallow them whole. They eat everything of the fish. That's the only thing they do not like to take and scale or gut or anything. They just eat the tail and all. Mary then asked, do they bite it in pieces to eat it or honestly just swallow it whole? Janice replied, yes, they bite it in pieces and eat it. And Grandpa could tickle the fish like them, and he could do that. He could fish with his bare hands, and he could throw up a fish out of the water just like that. Mary then added, that is amazing. And Lila said, where Grandpa would take us to feed them would be right here, shows on the map. They'd be back in under this tree right here. Mary said, oh, so Lila, you also got to go to the barn when you got older. Lila said, I'd say by the summer, after I was chased out of the woods, I was allowed to go out there too. Janice then added, that was about the time that he told you that Sheba had puppies. Lila said, yeah, and he told me for quite some time that Sheba was a dog. Mary asked, did you know better? And Lila replied, well, I never, the way the ditch line was. The tree was grown up out of the ditch line, trees and all, and briars and everything. And then there was a little space over across the ditch, and then this practically went all the way down to the ground at the time. The big and heavy lower tree branches are not as close to the ground now. As the tree grew taller, the lower limbs are further up on the tree. I was 5 at the time, and I saw a little arm reach out of the tree for the food. I said, Grandpa, that's not a dog. And he said, well, let's just call it a dog. Don't worry about it. Mary asked, why do you think your grandpa took you girls up there to feed the Bigfoot if he knew they were dangerous and that they might carry you off? Janice replied, I don't know, but I followed my grandfather everywhere. And I mean followed him everywhere. I don't know why. It was more like he couldn't get rid of me. Lila added, on your part, I think with me. I think he finally got the idea that if he got them used to us, they wouldn't bother us. Anonymous then asked, I was wondering if your grandfather took you up there, and by doing so, he was showing Fox that you were his, and for Fox not to bother you. Janice replied, possibly, because Papa did tell Fox, or he did the time that I ran into him. He kept a very calm tone, just like he used for the horses, and I used it with the horses when I break them. This is the tone he would use. Janice talks in a smooth and easy monotone sound. Easy, boy. Take it easy. Everything is going to be all right. Now go along, boy. Janice, back up. Stay in behind me, Janice. Everything's going to be okay. He was talking the same tone back and forth between me and Fox, and then he just said to Fox, now you need to go on. And I was just like, I don't know what this tree was, and it had moved in front of me. I thought Fox was a tree at first. Mary then asked, in other words, Fox just stepped out in front of you when you were going to your grandfather? Janice said yes. I was seeing my grandfather through the briars and the brush, up ahead of me, when I was coming back with the water jug. I thought it was just a tree stump, you know, or the top that had been broken out of a tree, like a pine tree or something. I wasn't paying attention, really. I was headed for Pa, and I was going pretty fast, and then something stepped in front of me, and I hit the back of its knee. Let me stand up. Janice then stands up and walks next to the door. I hit Fox right here. That's where my face hit. Janice shows on the back of her leg where she had hit Fox when she ran into him that day, and Anonymous took a picture of Janice pointing to the back of her knee. Lila then added, and we had a way of estimating the height, because we did know Andre the Giant, and he was 7 foot 4 inches tall. Janice once ran into Andre's kneecap one time at the Knoxville Coliseum one night, and she said it was about the same place that she hit him was the same place that she hit it, the Bigfoot, Fox. Janice then added, I hit Andre the Giant in the kneecap in the front, but I hit the Bigfoot in the back below the knee, and I was right around the same age. My mother, our mother, used to date the wrestlers. She had a great big crush on one called Jamie Goldman, which they have alias names too. Janice then trailed off, probably thinking of the past, and the interview continued in a few moments. But we need to stop here and consider some things that were said about the Bigfoot. I was a bit surprised that Janice had actually watched Fox catching fish from the creek and throwing them up on the bank for others to eat. I could only recall one other report about a mother Bigfoot who was doing the same thing for a small one that she was tending to. It always delights me to hear reports of the same type of behavior from different creatures. It confirms that no matter what part of the world, they tend to have the same or similar behavioral characteristics. As Janice had stated, they do care for their families, and the females are gentle and most caring mothers. Such reports are truly humbling. We share our planet with hominoids that are so afraid of us, our weapons, and for the most part, hostility towards them. It leads one to believe that there will be a reckoning someday. My name is Shannon Morgan, and welcome to Bigfoot Case Files. I'm trying to establish how the feedings were started, the behavior of the Bigfoot when they were fed by humans, the Carters' level of commitment and involvement with them while feeding them, and how many years they did so, but especially at what cost this was to each of them personally. The questions pick up where we left off. Mary asked, "On feeding Fox that first time that you went with your grandfather, you stated that your papa set the plate of food down on the ground and then backed up a few steps. And then Fox came and got the plate and ate the food scraps. Then Fox backed up, and your grandfather picked the plate up." Janice replied, "Yes. But now there for a while, Fox would not hand it over to Sheba to eat. But when he got so after that, I don't know how long, maybe 2 or 3 years, Fox would let Sheba have what he didn't want to eat after him. He would get his food first, and then he would leave the rest for them to get. And they had an order of eating, an order established, but this was just with Papa. Out in the wild, they didn't do this, but with Grandfather, whatever he had, then Fox got what he wanted. His pick was first, then Sheba, then the next one, whichever one was in line, whichever one was next to us and on down, and then the babies. If there wasn't any food left, then the babies didn't get any." Anonymous then asked, what your grandpa took up there to feed the Bigfoot. Was it a big pan of stuff or just a plate? Janice says, "Well, he at first took them a plate, and then he got a 5-gallon bucket and he used to, well, my grandmother used to cook for farmhands, so we always had a bunch of table scraps. She cooked for several men at times who helped on the farm there, and we had plenty of scraps, but then it got to that we didn't have enough table scraps. So Papa would go out to the restaurants and leave 5-gallon buckets. They weren't plastic buckets, they were metal buckets then. They would put their slop, scraping off the plates of food that people didn't eat. They would put it in there so he could slop the hogs and feed the Bigfoot. But now, if the slop had coleslaw in it, Papa would make sure he didn't feed any of that food to the Bigfoot, but hogs will eat anything. Hogs will eat bone or whatever, but a Bigfoot won't, and they will not eat coleslaw. They won't eat pickles, but they will eat cucumbers." Mary then said, "I've heard that the Bigfoot won't eat cabbage out of a garden either," and Janice replied, "It may be, I don't know, but I know they wouldn't eat the coleslaw. They would spit. Oh man, they would spit all over the place." Anonymous then added, "So in other words, if the food would be in the 5-gallon pail, they would reach in their hand in the slop and then eat it with their hands. Did he feed them like that?" Janice then said, "What we were talking out there that day when Lila was with us was corn. When I saw a hand come out and grab a corn cob and went back in, it was definitely one of the babies, because its hand was about the same size as mine. I know at the time I thought it was getting a scolding for grabbing the corn, because when the hand went back, the bark started, and it sounded like a squirrel going." Mary asked, "Did you see them out in the open, or were they always hid under this tree?" Lila says, "Around me, they tended to try to stay under the cover of the tree." Janice, "What about you?" Mary asked. "I think they got used to me. They stayed under cover at first, but when my grandfather took me up there, to feed them and everything, then they came out as if it was just him and me. They eventually got so that they didn't care to come on the open if I was there. They got used to me, but now I don't know whether they ever came out for Lila or not. I have no idea." Lila then added, "The only time that might be for me is when I thought it was a bear and her cubs coming out." It is needful to pause here for a moment and reflect on the wisdom of Janice's grandfather. When Janice said her papa had a way with animals, this line of questioning clearly shows that he did. What I am referring to in this case is where Robert Sr. took a plate of food to Fox. He sets the plate down some distance away and then backs up, showing respect for Fox's size and strength. Next, Fox approaches the plate, picks it up, eats, and then places it down and backs off, showing respect in return. Each was allowing the other some necessary space to flee if the need presented itself. Fox, while Janice was present, ate all the food and didn't give any to Sheba, who sat under the tree on the ground. We can take this to mean several different things, such as Fox wanting to make sure the food was good before allowing Sheba to start eating it, or Fox just didn't want to share such special food with anyone else. It does show that Fox counted himself dominant in all matters, which he was unmistakably the head of the family, and he was not going to tolerate any of the other family members questioning his rights as the dominant male. Therefore, his behavior seems quite normal. Human males also do the same. They give each other space, they insist on their rights, and they are the protectors of their mates. I believe Robert Sr. recognized that in order to get along with Fox and his family, and he had made certain that he in no way challenged Fox's authority over the others. To do so would certainly alienate Fox's trust in him. A few words from Janice establishes that maybe Sheba was afraid to eat anything offered for a good while. Here's what Janice related to me at another time. Fox would not let Sheba have anything off the plate for about 2 or 3 years. Papa took food that was meant for her in a bucket or a separate plate. Papa didn't give Sheba the plate either. He just sort of always threw the food out for her on the ground at first. Later, Papa would place the bucket down, and she would get food out of that on her own along with the rest of them. At first, Sheba didn't seem as friendly towards Papa or me. She was sort of standoffish when it came to us feeding them for a very long time. Maybe it was because Fox scolded her because she tried to eat before he did. With these comments from Janice, it helps us to see that Sheba, as Fox's mate, was kept in her place. Sheba, it seems, was more afraid of humans feeding her than Fox was. Of course, Sheba did not grow up in the same area, nor was she present for many years when Robert Sr. and Fox first became, according to Janice, friends. The two, Bigfoot and man, were said to spend hours together at the barn or in the fields learning each other's languages, as reported by Janice's grandmother. Next, I am including a part of the following night's interview with Janice regarding the Bigfoot's feeding habits, which developed through the years. We were looking through photographs she had brought to the interview session that were taken during various time periods of the Carter's farm when she spoke of this. Janice says, "Here is a photo of me, and there's the tree. That's the tree that they reached down out of and hid inside its lower branches. I know you can't tell much with our horses in the way, but that's it." "Is this the same tree that they reached out from under to grab the food?" Mary asked. "Yes, down under it. And when they reached down under it, I think it was the little ones, because the older ones would have broken the branches. It was the little ones, as the branch would swing up and down. They would come down, grab the food, and then go back up," Janice said. "About Fox, you said he would stand up and walk out and get the food, if just you and your papa were the only ones there. In other words, Fox ate first," Mary said. "Yes, Fox always ate first. He would come out, and then Sheba would come out. When the babies were little and the twins were real little, she wouldn't come out. After that, she didn't care. She would come out too, and bring her babies with her. But only after the first several years had passed. That's where Lila thought the bears were coming to the house. I'm sorry, but it wasn't bears. Sheba was bringing her young to the house for food. However, when Grandpa threw the food out, if Fox wanted it, he would grabble at them, not us, until he ran over to get what he wanted. I remember one time that one of them reached and grabbed some pineapple upside-down cake that Grandma had baked. A pineapple upside-down cake. And Grandpa had taken it up there to feed to them. Grandpa hadn't taken any other thing that time, so he had gone to the crib to get them all some corn. Papa took the cake, and Papa was going to give it to the little ones, and then Fox wouldn't let them have it. That cake was homemade pineapple upside-down cake, not the store-bought kind, and Fox double-dared them to come out and get it. How would he do that? Mary asked. He growled, growling and clicking and grinding and popping his jaw sounds. I don't know how to explain it, but somehow they made popping noises in their jaw. It's in their jaws in there some way. Mary then asked, "You said clicking. Did they ever make a clicking sound then?" "Yes, like a chicken," Janice says. "If you've ever seen little chickens, you know, like a chicken sound." "Then that's not a sound like the popping of their teeth. It's a true clicking sound," Mary asked. Janice then replied, "Yes, now that's the only thing I can think of that sounds like it. We used to get them little chickens when we were kids, and it sounds like them. That sounds not exactly right, but it's kind of close to the sound they make." Janice hands the next photograph to me, and this is a picture of what I was talking about. This is Molasses Lick. The cattle put their head in there, and the molasses would run down, as there was a hole in the top of it to pour the molasses in. The Bigfoot could reach their hand down in there and get it. Stopping again for a moment, we learn that Fox actually threatened other family members in order to get the best food. What he didn't want or think was good tasting, he would finally let the others have it. Janice claims that Fox loved sweets the most, and that he would hoard them if there was any to be had. The molasses lick was so highly favored by the Bigfoot. It was put out to fatten the cattle and keep them healthy in the winter, but it also fattened the Bigfoot for winter. Janice wrote me once about Sheba's teeth being in such horrible condition that they were rotting away. I do feel like this was caused by what food, as we humans eat ourselves, being fed to Sheba so often. But let us move on to the remaining questions and answers on feeding of the Bigfoot. How often did you go with your papa to feed Fox? Did you go with him every time he went out, or just on occasion? Mary asked. I went out with Papa every night I could for years, Janice replied. How long did it take to feed? Did you have to stand there while the Bigfoot ate? Or did you have to come back and get the empty bucket later? Lila added, What I remember is Grandpa just setting the bucket down. I seem to remember him just emptying the bucket and setting it over there at the side to grab, and a lot of times, he would go on in and feed the cattle and the horses, and allowing us to trail on in after him. Then he would come back and grab the bucket and go. Then you didn't always stay there and watch the Bigfoot eat, Mary asked. No, we didn't just stand there. It was just a chore, Janice said. Lila added, It was just something else to be fed. You feed the hogs first as you were going up. You feed the hogs, you feed the Bigfoots, you fed Susie Q. Susie Q was a pony. You fed Trixie, a Tennessee walking horse. And then you went and fed the old bull, which was meaner than the devil. And then you would throw things to the skunk that Papa had. He had pet skunks, and then he would milk the 5 cattle, Janice said. And for how many years did your Papa continue to feed the Bigfoot? Mary asked. He fed them until he had the stroke. I fed them for a while after he had the stroke, for almost 6 months, and then he went back to feeding them. And he fed them up until he had to have the colonostomy done. Lila then chimed in. He had a colonostomy done when he was 87, so that would have been 9 years ago. Well, 9 years ago in October. So he was 87 when he had to quit. Mary then confirmed. So in October of 1993 is when your grandfather stopped feeding the Bigfoot. Janice and Lila both replied, Yes, it was. A pattern was set then between the Bigfoot and Robert Sr. with the daily feedings. Over the course of 20 years, Fox and his family were certainly assured of daily food. I find this most amazing to say the least. Only during the 6-month period that Janice took over the feedings while her grandfather recuperated from a stroke did he get a vacation from feeding these Bigfoot. I wondered if he ever tired of feeding them and wished for it to end. Even Janice realizes, and has spoken to me about the times, that she watched her grandfather trudge to the barn with food for Fox during the worst weather imaginable. She has talked with me about the times when her grandfather was so sick that none of them understood how he made it to the barn and back. So for Robert Sr., there had to be a tremendous price to pay. I cannot help but feel that somehow the rewards well outweighed the cost of the courage. Continuing on with the interview, the talk took off in another vein quite unexpectedly. All at once, Janice and Lila seemed to be at odds with each other, and now they began to talk about some dangers involved with the twin, Blackie. Lila was wondering if maybe the Bigfoot had finally grown used to her when Sheba and the babies came down from the barn late one evening. Mr. Carter had been delayed in feeding them on time. Lila thought for years that it was a mother bear with cubs until the night of this specific interview. I believe, out of a long-ago suppressed fear for Lila's life, Janice is now more than a little agitated over a past memory and blurts out the following to Lila. Janice, the only time the Bigfoot came out was on that day that you got mad at Mama, and you went over there in that field, and we were screaming for you to get out of the way, because that was Blackie that was after you. He was right behind her, and she's deaf, she can't hear a thing. And we were screaming bloody murder, and he was like from here, like you're sitting there, just right on her, less than 2 feet apart. That was really close. Was he reaching out for her? Mary asked. Yes, he was, and I thought he had her. Lila takes an ink pen and a tablet, obviously a bit shaken, and says, the house and the trailer are here, and there's a little barn here, and a little shed here, and here's the ditch line. And the trees were here. I was 16, and there's a bunch of trees here. I need to ask this question, Lila. Were you on your monthly? Mary asked. Lila replied, it's possible. I don't rightly remember. I do know why she whipped me. Why she made me so mad. It was because Mama finally told this poor little old boy that I could go out with him. She sat up, drank a cup of coffee, talked to me, talked to him, told me I could go. She had been asleep the whole time and had no memory of it, and when I came in and got out of the truck, she immediately started laying in with a belt. Lila then looks even more upset, and Janice does too. Janice added, our mother would sleepwalk and talk, and I do too. Lila then continued, I ran from the trailer, and there was a little gate right here going to the barn. I ran this way, crossed over the ditch line, and went into the trees. I wasn't comfortable in those trees because basically, these trees are the ones that the black Bigfoot was walking into in that one picture. I was never really comfortable in those trees. I remember kind of looking around, and I went through them and through the ditch line, and then I came around in the field, and I came back up into this ditch line and into these trees. Mama and Janice were basically both right there, yelling, get over here, and I couldn't understand them, saying there was somebody behind you or something like that. Janice then said, Lila, didn't I come after you in the field? No, you were standing next to Mama when I came in from the field. I had kind of kneeled down to keep them from seeing me. I remember I had my hands on the ground beside of me, one knee down and one up, kind of like a starter's position. And I was there, and all of a sudden, it was like, okay, there's something behind me, and I just went off. I never saw what was behind me, but I knew something was there. All of a sudden, I knew it was there, and then I was whipped. I went as fast as I could get, and I made a beeline for them. Mama told me that there was a man behind me. Janice then said it chased her from here to there, points out location on the map, and then stopped because we were screaming the whole time. How old would Blackie have been about then? Mary then asked. Lila said, this would have been in 1985 or 1986. So I'm not exactly sure how old he was. I do know that the picture of the cat was taken nearly the exact same time, maybe give or take a month or two. Mary then added, that would have made Blackie around 12 years old. Janice says, yeah, he was old enough. He was already doing nasty things that I told Mary about by then. Please go ahead and state what the nasty things that Blackie was doing, Mary added. Playing with himself, playing with his privates, Janice said. Anonymous then chimed in, he would masturbate? Yeah, in other words, yeah, once, and it was the oddest thing, when he did, where he did it. Was on a tree, on the roots of a tree that was up out of the ground. The next day, the bumblebees would just swarm that place like honeybees. I don't know what the deal was. I've never seen a man out and do that on a tree. But I mean, that sounds horrible, but they just swarmed it, the bees did, Janice said. Did you just go back the next day, or how did you determine that this happened? Mary said. Oh, it was close in the area where I climbed the tree. It was over in the side of the woods because he was standing over there, Janice says. So you were outside when this happened? Yes, I was out when he had done it, but I don't know where Lila was. How far away were you from Blackie when he did this? Mary asked. I was in the front yard playing. I think I was the only one in the yard. Was he watching you while he was masturbating? Mary asked. Yes, I think he was watching me, and he made me very nervous. I didn't trust him one bit when he started to get older. He made me very, very uncomfortable. He never tried anything. But then it was a little bit after that, when he was about 7, I would say. When he did that, and I wasn't that old. I wasn't 16. I'm sorry. I was maybe 14 at the time. I'm trying to think exactly when it was that he did that on the tree. I think I was playing with these horses in the front yard, and I hadn't started my monthly yet. I do know that. I hadn't started, and I was not pregnant. I don't know what he was doing. He was standing over there and doing it. When did we get those horses, Lila? Because we didn't have the horses yet. I think it was a year before we got them. Lila then chimed in. We got the horses the year that we moved back from town. Janice then continued. So I was 13. Blackie would have been 6 when he did that, to give you a precise year of what happened. So Blackie grew and matured very fast, Mary asked. Yes, he grew fast. By the time he was 3, he was as tall as me, and I was 4'11" for years. Actually, he was a little taller than I was. But when I was 10, he was 3, because it was at that time that I played with him in Sheba's cave. I found this information on Blackie a bit disconcerting, but not unnatural at all for a male entering sexual maturity. In fact, this is a common developmental trait practiced by pre-adolescent males. Blackie being only 6 years of age would make one question how old a Bigfoot male would be when they're able to produce offspring. Being as how the human male can become sexually active at a very early age, though lacks the ability to impregnate, this is not beyond the realm of believability. So what are we to make of this situation? Blackie is seemingly very attracted to human females. Is this possible? Are other reports of this nature true? Only time and the availability of a Bigfoot in this natural environment growing up, around human females, can give us the answers to these questions. I do entertain strong thoughts that if a male Bigfoot grows up in close proximity and actually interacts with female humans his age, that he could eventually be sexually attracted to human females. There is still more to consider. Early on in the investigation, Janice had hinted at not trusting Blackie on several occasions. I finally gathered some courage, and I asked Janice point blank if she was worried that Blackie would rape a human woman, as I sensed she might be referring to just such an incident. I was more than surprised to learn that there actually was an attack on a teenage girl on the road that borders the farm. Since the details are so gruesome, we cannot give any names, but suffice it to say, the young lady was eventually rescued by 2 neighbor men and brought to the Carters' home for first aid and help in contacting the authorities. The Carters were the only family in the neighborhood with a telephone at the time. Janice remembers the girl very well that night. She also remembers the older woman trying to clean her up as she was extremely bloody. It is believed that the young lady involved was around 13 years of age when she was attacked and raped. She was often seen walking to her boyfriend's house during the day in the summer. Her journey was quite a distance, and she had to pass the Carter home on her way. Late one afternoon, someone or something pulled this poor child off into the woods and raped her. She was heard screaming by the neighbormen who came to her aid. They found her in severe shock and not in her right mind. She was taken to the hospital and treated, but never returned home, that Janice knows about anyways. She was sent to a mental institution, never regaining her mental faculties. The girl's parents later told everyone that their daughter had died. It is not understood why they felt the need to claim their own daughter's death, but it does indicate extreme emotional distress on their parts. The parents moved away for many years, but have since recently returned to the community. It is now known that the daughter is still in the care of a distant mental health facility. The boyfriend and another male friend of the teenage girl were arrested for the rape. After some tests were made, it was determined that the boyfriend and the other male were not responsible for the attack, and they were cleared and released from custody. Later, the accused sued the newspaper for printing the arrest charges, and all was hushed from that point on. Janice has talked with the victim's boyfriend's mother, and was told to let the matter alone. I find it distasteful to even include the incident, but Janice claims that the sperm was not identified as being from a human, but from an unknown animal. She remembers this being reported at the time. How accurate Janice's information is, it would depend on the source. Here's a small portion of the interview concerning the rape case. So what about the rape again? Have we done all that we can do to verify it? You said the law called in the forestry services after the young lady was molested by a Bigfoot, Mary asked. Yes, they did, Janice said. They were called in by the law because the law officers did not believe any of you and thought you were making it up. Is this right? Mary asked again. Janice replies, yes. Also, it was determined that some unknown type of animal did rape the girl out in those woods, Mary said. Janice added, yes, that was determined through lab test procedures. Do you feel uncomfortable with me including this rape incident in the book? Mary asked Janice. It doesn't matter in that way. I just want to be able to back up my claims, Janice says. Do you know for sure it happened? Says Mary. Oh, I know it happened. I just can't prove that it did happen. I don't have any newspaper article to back me up, as I said. I don't have anyone to back me up on that. The neighbors are dead, Papa's dead, and Lila is too young to remember. We will just have to take Janice's word for what she knows about this incident. Unexpectedly, though, her husband Paul did come to her rescue one day while I was at the farm with Joseph, Janice, and Paul. I had asked Janice to show me the place where the rape was said to have happened at. She complied, and I did a video interview with her, as she described what she knew of the details while Paul waited in the van. It was an unbearably hot day for April, and I taped while Janice pointed out the place where the Bigfoot had pulled the teenage girl off of the road. She also pointed out the direction that the neighbormen lived who came to her rescue. This spot on the top of the hill near the Carter farm is almost half a mile from the old house and completely out of view from any neighbors at the time of our investigation. It is a remote spot in the road with woods on one side and a large cornfield on the opposite. Towards the end of the taping, I asked Janice a particular question, and she called Paul to get out of the van and come to her. In the ensuing conversation, he also related the rape incident, as he remembered it well, and he vouched that it had indeed actually occurred. It seems that the rape was talked about for miles around and brought much concern to the county those many years ago. It does seem like with the 2 young men turned loose, found not guilty of the rape, and the lab results turning up as non-human sperm, and no other men were ever sought for the crime, the facts do speak for themselves. Something very unnatural did happen, something so horrid, that it seemed to have robbed a young girl of her mental health. Did you know that After the regular feedings were stopped because of Janice's grandfather's ill health and advanced age, there were some ramifications from the Bigfoot to deal with. The interview on the 4th of February continues, where Janice tells of the Bigfoot being hardly pleased with the abrupt cessation of food that they had relied on. I fear that Robert Sr. realized that they had learned to depend on the feedings, and that's the reason he did not stop them until he was financially and physically unable to continue them. Recent information from Robert Jr. suggests the probability exists that Robert Sr. also fed the Bigfoot at 4:30 a.m. in the morning, so this was a new revelation for Janice when her uncle informed her of this. Here is what transpired in the same line of questioning. Mary asked, "So in October of 1993 is when your grandfather stopped feeding the Bigfoot?" Janice replied, "That's when he stopped feeding them, and that's when they started coming to the house, a lot, and they would get under the trailer. Well, I call it the house, but it was Mama's double-wide trailer." Lila added, "Well, they've been getting in under the trailer before that. What I really remember is about 4 years before that." "I know, but they were there. That's when they hit the side of the trailer. One of them did that night," Janice says. "And they put that big dent on top of the trailer," Lila added. Mary then continued, "That was my next question. Were there ever times that your papa did not feed them, and were there any repercussions from Fox because your papa had not fed them?" Janice went on, "Yep, there were times that papa did not feed them. That time that they came to the house, my grandfather was already at my mother's trailer, on occasion, and well, they were back and forth at that time. I don't know what the deal was, but at any rate, Papa was at the house that night, and Mama was at the house that night. They were all sleeping, and Fox, Papa, did not feed him that night. That's why I went. Fox put his face in the screen, and we had the window up. Me and Chuck were sitting there in the kitchen, playing Skip-Bo or something. It was at about 12 a.m., I guess, but we were sitting up, and we were sitting there, and that was when was that? Oh, that was in 1989, because it was the same year that they were having the war over there in Iraq. Or was it 1991? Okay, it was 1991 then. They were having a war over in Iraq, and we went in the kitchen and started playing cards. Fox put his face in the window screen, and Chuck had his back like you and I are sitting. Fox was just breathing right down Chuck's back. Chuck jumped up, turned around, and went ballistic. He was just having a fit, and then he started cussing and carrying on at me. Fox just pushed out the screen, and everything came through. Fox reached right through, and he was going. Janice demonstrates how Fox was frantically reaching in the window to grab at Chuck with his arms fully extended. He was going like that, but he couldn't get in, and Chuck was having a fit. Papa told Chuck to shut his fussing up, and he said to me, "Janice, go out there and take care of him." So, I went out the back porch and I handed a pail. It was little, I would call it more a bucket, but it's actually a little pail. I just put it down in the dog food. I couldn't think of what to give Fox, so I just put it down in the dog food. I scooped him a pail of that dog food and I handed it out to him, and he was there at the back porch door. He was waiting on me, and I handed it to him, and he said thank you. Now, they do talk. He was waiting on me, and he said thank you. He turned around and then walked off a ways. Well, Chuck had carried on for I guess a good hour. We had closed the window and everything, and he said, "I'm not staying here." And we came out here and stayed in this motel. "Chuck was your husband at this time then?" Mary asked. "That was my husband at the time, and he had Amanda in his arms when we went out to the door, and Fox was growling and snarling and carrying on." I believe that if Chuck had not had Amanda, or if I had taken Amanda away from Chuck, Fox probably would have attacked him. So Fox was obviously hungry, and our grandfather hadn't fed him. Well, he had not fed any of them, as far as that goes. "So that was during the time that they weren't being fed?" Mary asked. "That was one of the times that Papa had not fed them, and they expected that food. They got so really expected him to give them that food. They would be waiting on him. If Papa was an hour or two late for some reason, they would start heading down towards the house. Lila can remember. She can remember Sheba and the babies coming down towards the house one time." Lila then added, "At that time, I was so little that the closest thing I could associate them with was bears, and I asked Janice the other day. I said, 'Janice, I've got this picture in my head.' I said, 'That bear came to the house with the 2 cubs. And she goes, 'What bear came to the house with 2 cubs?' I said, 'There was a bear. I can see it plain as day. It came down to the drive here.' I can do a lot better by showing you. Down the drive, it was coming down through here, and I was right here. And we were standing at the apple tree right there, and it was coming down. And I remember Grandpa said, 'Get to the house.' I was just so little that it seemed to me like it was a bear, and I remember him telling us to get back to the house, but he didn't come into the house with us." Janice added, "No, he went and fed them, because Whit and Ruth had been there that night, and he hadn't fed them on time. They didn't get to slop the hogs and feed the cows or anything else. Feeding time was a certain hour, and if the food wasn't there..." Anonymous then chimed in. "When you saw them coming down the driveway, Lila, were they on all 4s? "Yes," Lila replied. "Is that what made you associate them with bears?" Lila then replied again, To me, they were on all 4s. They might have stood up sometime during that, I don't know. They didn't come all the way down to the gate before Grandpa told us to get in the house." Well, I thought it was a bear, of course. I had recently seen the Grizzly movie by that time, so I was hitting the house. Not having any statistics to compare with this instant of the Bigfoot becoming accustomed to regular feedings at the same time each day, I can only refer to other animals that I do know about, and that would be our pets, our cats and dogs that we feed on a daily basis. They soon know when feeding time is, and they are Johnny on the spot when their food is served. If you are not prepared to feed them at the regular feeding hour, they will soon get your attention by barking, whining, scampering energetically around, or sticking their wet noses into your leg or hands. They know it's time to eat, and they want to make certain that you do also. One other activity that I'm sure most pet owners are familiar with that pets use to get your attention at feeding time is pacing. I've seen dogs and cats both pace back and forth from their feeding dishes to the person who feeds them until they are fed. Bigfoot are much more intelligent than dogs or cats, but I would like to think they resort to odd behavior to get your attention if you're not there at established feeding times. So, what did Sheba do when she wasn't fed? She came to the source, to the house, and she received Robert Sr.'s attention by doing so. This also seems a paradox to their former long-term elusive behavior. Even though it took Sheba nearly 2 years to come out in the open when Janice was helping her papa at the barn, she suddenly threw all caution to the wind in favor of receiving food and having a full belly. We can note that Sheba did not come to the house, or start to the house, until after the family's visitors were gone. Evidently, Sheba was not quite brave enough to approach the home until that time. According to Janice, the moment Whit and Ruth were well out of sight, Sheba had waited as long as she was going to. Maybe food had been scarce on this particular day. Sheba was not only coming to the house to see if she could get food for herself, but she was also bringing her 2 babies to be fed also. This proves to me that they can become very dependent upon humans for food, same as other wild creatures do. Compare this to a bear's habit of coming back to the same campground dumpster every night looking for food that has been thrown away by humans. Even though this is not regular feeding per se, the dumpster is a persistent food source for large opportunistic omnivores. Next, I asked about the horses that the girls rode on the farm. Would the horses act up when the Bigfoot were around? Mary asked Janice. Oh yeah, they'd act up, but the day I got pushed over, I was on Dan. He didn't act up then, but I was running him, yeah, and Sheba just came out, and bam. Did Sheba run out on all 4s, or do you know? Janice replied, I don't know. All I know is she was just there. She was in my face. Her face was dead even with mine, and my horse was 14 hands high. That's how tall Dan was. I could barely see over his back, and I mean wham, she was right there in my face before I realized she was anywhere in sight, or even anywhere near me. But she went back into that same tree line. I was headed that way, and she hit my horse, and boom, over I went. Lila then added, and this is basically where she was when she got knocked over, points the area out. And then this is where I was when my horse threw me. It was the same horse, about a month later. He threw me, and he had never offered to throw me or anything like that before that time. He never acted up before then, before Sheba pushed him over. And when he came around the trees right there, I was going this way. Had him turned and started this way, and next thing I knew, I was on the ground and he was going down that way. Janice then chimed in. Midnight was the only horse that would not act up and throw you if one of them was around. Midnight would stop and not budge another foot. But now, he would stop if a kid was on his back. He was a stud horse, but you could ride him without a saddle, bridle, or anything, just by touch, for that's the way I trained him. If a kid was on his back, he would not step in a mud hole anywhere that he thought he might stumble. So he was the only one who never acted up around them if they were around. But Midnight wouldn't go anywhere if they were around. He would just stop and look around at you like you were crazy. The question of whether or not the horses act up when the Bigfoot are around was one that I had contemplated for quite a few years. Even though there are many reports suggesting that horses and cows are afraid of Bigfoot, I wanted to know whether or not the Carters had experienced any difficulties with their livestock when the Bigfoot creatures were around. Here is added information about this from Janice that she submitted to me several months later. The cattle and the horses never paid much attention to them if the Bigfoot came in to eat after they were locked in the barn, or if they were there to be milked or fed first. If the Bigfoot were there before them, they acted spooked and would bawl and neigh and tromp around and not want to go into the barn. We have even had to cover the horses' eyes with our shirts to get them to enter the barn if the Bigfoot were near it when we wanted to ride them or feed them. I remember once that I was training my young stud horse, whose name was Little Black, to let someone ride him, as he would only allow me on him at that time. I had mounted him in the drive of the barn, and Old Fox was in that loft over on the front side of the barn facing the road. He let out a roar, and Little Black came walking out on his hind feet with me rearing up and walked all the way to the gap going to the field. Fox really spooked him. I just kept him on his back feet all the way to the gap, because I knew if I let him flip backwards with me, he could have jabbed me with the saddle horn and hurt me, and if I had let him have all 4s, he would have gotten his head down and have bucked something awful. I could not afford to have him buck or throw me at the time, because I was pregnant with Jackie, so that would have been 1987. It took me 3 months to train Little Black to do what I asked him to do when I rode him. The cattle would go up to the Bigfoot if they were away from the barn, or if the Bigfoot were not going to chase and kill them. The horses sort of gave them a wide berth, except every once in a while, they too would go up to them out away from the barn. That is, all except Dan, my Morgan horse. After Sheba knocked him over on his side, he would never get near them again without acting up. Once, Dan even sat on his rump to keep me from leading close to where Sheba, Blackie, and Toby were. A horse named Cinnamon threw me once when I was 13, because Fox ran across in front of her while I was riding her on top of the hill. He just darted out from the woods that used to be above the barn and then ran into the cornfield. It spooked her, and she bucked and I came off. I did not have a saddle on her at that time, as I was riding her bareback. I really do not think the livestock acted too bad overall because of the Bigfoot's presence. They would run and act up some, and did cause us some trouble. It was usually the new cattle and horses that gave the most trouble when they saw them. The old ones, I guess they got used to them, and they didn't pay them as much heed. Now the goats were an entirely different story. They were scared to death of the Bigfoot. They would run you over to get away from where they were, and I mean run right up over the top of you, not around you. Goat hooves hurt, and they are sharper than what they appear to be. The pigs and hogs didn't pay much attention to them at all, unless they went to grab one of them. Then the fight was on, and the hogs are the meanest thing on earth. The little pigs didn't stand a chance against the Bigfoot, but the full-grown hogs would fight and squeal and slash. The old sow was a hateful gut, and the Bigfoot didn't mess with her much, but Fox loved to tease the old boar that Papa had. Fox would slap him over the wood fence, and that hog would try his best to slash old Fox's arm or hand. The neutered full-grown pigs are the ones that the Bigfoot got 3 of, not the old sow or the old boar hogs. The chickens, if loose, ran from the Bigfoot if they could, but then an old chicken will run from everything anyways. I know once that we had turkeys there, but they did not like the Bigfoot either. The old gobbler got caught first, because he tried to fight Blackie and flog him when he crept up on him in a belly crawl, so the Bigfoot grabbed him by the leg. Blackie took and got a hold of his neck and killed him, and took him to the top of the hill somewhere. I guess he ate him. We had 4 turkey hens, and they all went missing too, and Papa said that the Bigfoot got them. An old bull that Papa kept never gave the Bigfoot any trouble, or Papa either, as far as that goes, after Fox knocked him out cold when he charged at Papa one time. The dogs and the cats either learned to live around them peacefully, or else they would become Bigfoot bait. I do not think Fox and Sheba liked a yappy dog much. They would kill all of our dogs that remained there that barked at them all the time. They did not bother the dogs that only barked once in a while. I remember once, Uncle had a beagle that he called Pluto, and Sheba would even pet that dog. Yes, she would pet him, just like you or I would pet a dog on the top of its head. That old beagle was here from the time I was 3, until he died at 16 years of age when I was 19. All of the Bigfoot seemed to like him, but I hated that dog. He would take my other dogs off to hunt and leave them behind, and I always had to go look for them. Sometimes, I think the Bigfoot and he had some type of agreement, because I would find the dog he took hunting with him dead, and by all appearances, the dog had died at the hand of a Bigfoot. Next, I wanted to know as much as possible about the Bigfoot's appearance, especially Fox's, so my next questions were mostly about him. Okay, so we're going to go on to questions about Fox's appearance. Did either of you ever get close enough to touch him? Lila said no, and Janice says yes. How did his skin feel, Janice? It was like touching saddle leather. It's kind of what it felt like, and that is the appearance that it gives, and it felt thick, fleshy thick, like tough skin, that's all I can say. Okay, and about his hair, how did his hair feel? Silky, and it's a finer, silkier feel than ours, well to me it is anyways. And what do you estimate Fox's height as? Lila says 7½ feet, and Janice says 7½ to 8 feet tall. I couldn't say exactly, I would be off a few inches. And what was the hair color of Fox, Mary asked. Janice replies, black, and it had a blue tint to it. It would show a blue tint to it, with the sun on it before it would show a red tint. He was as black as an ace of spades, except for the private area of his body, which was brown. I do not know if the hair in that area was stained brown by urine or not. And what was the length of his hair, according to where it was located on the body? Okay, so on the head, I would say 6 inches, maybe 2 to 4 inches elsewhere, except on the chest area where it thinned out to maybe an inch over the breast and across. Mary then asked, what would you estimate the width was across Fox's shoulders? Oh, my husband is a 40, and he would dwarf my husband, I would say. Lila chimed in. Now Bob is a 56. I have measured Bob, my husband. So Janice said, so let's go with 70 to 80 inches. Easy. Janice continued, because Grandpa bought Fox a white t-shirt one time, and it was a 6X. I don't know where he got it, and Grandpa wore a size 40 overall, but Fox couldn't get them on when Fox tried putting them on. Mary then inquired, well, now how did this happen? Janice continues, it was Grandpa. Grandpa gave him a shirt, and Grandpa took him a pair of his overalls. I call them overalls, and they are big blue jean material when Grandma would starch these things until they would stand alone. They're not blue jeans, though. Grandpa wore a size 40, and he took the overalls up there and demonstrated. You know, he pretended like he was putting them on, and then took them off over his own clothes. Then, he asked Fox to put them on. Fox put his leg down in them, and he couldn't get it. Grandpa did manage to get him a pair later on, and I think those were a size 60-something. He got Fox to put them on one time, and Fox wouldn't wear them, but he would wear the t-shirt. Lila chimed in. I do know that Grandpa got the biggest pair that he could get, because I remember being with Grandpa when he got the pair. That place was in Knoxville, at the old West Town Mall, before they did that building over and everything. They had a pair of blue jeans that belonged to Haystack Calhoun in there. I think he sent someone else to actually go get them. I think he made a deal with whoever owned the store to buy a pair of Haystack Calhoun's jeans. That's where he got, and Haystack weighed 700 pounds at the time. The man is still living in Knoxville, and I see him every once in a while. He's lost a considerable amount of weight since then. Mary then asked, "Were you there, Janice, when your papa tried to get Fox to put the jeans on?" "Yes, I was there when he tried to get Fox to put them on." Grandpa took the blue jeans up there. He went to feed and took them to the barn with him, just like he would take the blankets or whatever he gave to them. He would just take them right along. They are thieves, the Bigfoot. They would steal stuff, because they took them up there and Fox came out and Grandpa talked to them. Sometimes I could understand what they were saying, and other times I just couldn't understand a word. Grandpa would talk in a dialect himself that I never learned, but I don't know what type of dialect it was. Maybe Lila Ruth knows this dialect. But Grandpa told Fox that basically he wanted him to put the shirt on. Fox got the shirt on just fine, the t-shirt, and then Grandpa was wanting Fox to put the pants on. Grandpa showed him how. He put them on himself, and then he showed Fox how to take them off. Grandpa got the t-shirt on Fox, and I was a teenager, because I was becoming aware between a woman and a man, and it's the reason Grandpa was trying to do this. You could not see Sheba's private parts, except for her breasts, but now the males, you could. Well, at least they're Tommyknocker. That's what we'll call it to be nice. But at any rate, Fox put them on, and he had them on, and when we left, he had the bigger jeans on. But the next day, Fox didn't have the jeans on, but he kept the t-shirt. He wore that t-shirt until it was rags. The only thing holding it on was the collar around the neck, and he wore that thing for years. It was filthy. Lila then chimed in. Okay, when Mama saw him jump the fence, all she could talk about was that t-shirt. She didn't know why they were bothering. Of course, she kept saying that big man. I don't know why he bothered to wear that t-shirt. You couldn't even make a rag out of it. Anonymous then asked them, "So your mother never really said they were Bigfoot. She just thought they were hairy men?" Janice replied, She just said it. That's all she would ever claim it was, a big hairy man. Mary then asked, "So your mother was never aware of the Bigfoot creatures there?" Lila replied, "Oh, she was aware," and Janice added, "She was very much aware of them. She just did not admit what they were. And my mother had a very convenient way of forgetting stuff if she wanted to. She would turn it around, and Lila can testify to that. She'd turn it around and make it what it wasn't even if it was something that was horrible." It is evident here that the girl's mother, Melvina, also had a problem with admitting that there were creatures that were unmistakably abnormal in nature running around in plain sight on various occasions. Melvina also appears to have used denial that everything is alright, everything is normal, and that it's just an extremely large, hairy man running around with insufficient clothing on. Trying to retain my perspective, when I look at just how abnormal that is, staggers the imagination. Yet, I also did this for many years, until reality at last set in, and I'm so glad it has. I no longer have to say to my children, "No, you didn't see anything, it's only your imagination." It must be that schizophrenic young man that lives across the creek on the backside of the property, looking in your window at night. I used every excuse in the book to rationalize away the Bigfoot also. They were just these huge, tall men with long black coats passing by in front of our house at night. Even though I would get my shotgun out and sit and wait for one of these things to break through the door, they never did. How ironic is it for me to meet with others who have done the same thing? But how very fortunate we are to have Janice tell us about her experiences. She was not allowed to escape reality. She saw these rare hominids on nearly a daily basis, and as only a child can do, she adjusted to them as being part of her everyday life. By this time, we had strayed from the topic of how Fox looked, and now we were back on track again. As memories popped up at random, I allowed Janice and Lila to continue with them in order to keep the spontaneity going. Here is more information on the physical appearance of Fox and a bit more on Sheba. Okay, Anonymous wants to know the answer to this question. Does a hair on a Bigfoot cover the buttocks? Lila and Janice both answer yes. So they are not like some of the primates that have a bare butt. Janice says, no, the hair covers the butt, and it covers the female's private parts. Remember that the penis is the only thing you can see on the male. You could not see the testicles. I've never seen the testicles, except for one of them, and it was light-colored. Okay, so what is the estimated length of Fox's fingers, if you had any guess? Janice replied, the palms, their palms, okay. I haven't grown since the last time I touched hands with Fox. His palms, with my hands out like that. Janice holds up her hand, facing out from her face. Fox's palms goes up and all the way over mine. I don't know how long my hand is. Let's measure. He can actually, if I place my hand in his, the top of his hand can fold over mine. Janice shows how Fox's fingers would go down to her wristline. In other words, Fox could fold his fingers from the beginning joint all the way down over her hand, and his fingers would touch her wristline. Did he actually put his hands to yours and do that? Mary asked. Yes, he did. Were you communicating during these times when you were touching him with your hand? Yeah, just talking, but he would do that. I would just put up my hands like this. I measured the length of Janice's hand, and that measures a good 7 inches. So his fingers would definitely have to be 10 inches long in order for him to do this. Then Sheba's hands were smaller, Mary asked. Janice says, yes, her hands were smaller, but her hands were still big compared to even a large human male's hands. Anonymous then asked what the color of Fox's fingernails were, if you were able to see them that close up. Janice said, the skin they're dark, and they always look dirty to me. They were thick, and they do bite their fingernails. They've got very thick nails. See, these are my real nails, and they're thick, and my thumbnails are thickest, and theirs is thicker than my thumbnail. Okay, and how about the Bigfoot's teeth? How thick were Fox's teeth? Teeth? Yeah, maybe the size of a horse's tooth, maybe half an inch thick. Their teeth do not protrude out of their mouths, Janice replies. There are reports from across the United States where the eyewitnesses state that the Bigfoot have fangs. The few Bigfoot that I have seen, and Janice has seen close up, do not have any protruding teeth. What they do have is elongated eye teeth. We had now reached the part of the interview where certain, hopefully verifiable facts were needed. We were interested in the nature of the appearance, the breeding, and the birthing of the Bigfoot that lived on the farm. At the time of this interview session, we did not have any authenticating information from the uncle and grandfather that Fox was first seen in the year of 1947. This came later in our investigations. Mary to Janice. Okay, so going back to our timeline, did you ever locate your records of the birth of Sheba's babies? I know you said you were searching through a few storage sheds for a little pocket notebook that you kept records of Sheba's babies in, and some words that you heard them say. Janice replies, Not yet. First there was Fox. I remember the first 2 encounters. Then in the fall, Sheba was pregnant at the time. Mary then asked, so they had to have been together as mates. Lila chimed in. They had to have been together when Papa took me to feed them the first time. The next year, Sheba had the twins, and that was in 1973. That was when Blackie would have been born. Janice then continued, in 1976, the one twin went missing, and I've tried my best to remember what Papa called that one. Diamond, maybe. It was some gem, but I don't know if it was diamond, jewel, or what, so it may have been a female one, but it went missing when it was 3 years old. After that in 1977, she had Toby, and he was a light-colored one. Like a tan, dirty color. I don't know if he was actually by Fox because he was so light. A little bit more, and he would have been a dirty dishwasher white. He looked kind of like what the old shag carpet used to look like. When Toby was a baby, he was almost a white color, like a cream white, but he got darker as he got older. So that may have been contributed to, the darker color, and the red clay mud. But that's what we have here, a lot of red clay mud. Did Toby have hair on him when he was born? Mary asked. They all have hair, but it's like, have you ever seen a puppy, a little baby puppy? That's kind of sort of how they looked, sort of naked. Then after a few days, they look sort of fuzzy. Not really fuzzy, but they get longer hair on them, and then when they get about 6 weeks old, they get fuzzy like a puppy does. These guys don't have very much hair on them at all when they're born, but it starts growing in, and it grows pretty rapidly. Mary then asked, about how many months old are they when their hair starts growing in more? I would say right at about 6 weeks when it really starts growing in good, and by the time they're a year old, it's thick, but not long. It gets longer the more mature that they get, and I do think that they break off the hair on their manes on their head. I don't think that it keeps growing. It's shaggy. It looks shaggy. Sheba always looked shaggy, because her hair was a different length. Was Sheba's hair that shaggy too? Mary asked. Yes, her hair was that way even when she tucked it behind her ear, like this. Janice demonstrates how Sheba took her fingers and smoothed the hair back behind her ears. I mean, it was different lengths on her head. So Toby is light-colored, Mary said. Janice replies, and after that, Sheba had a female that died, so I think Sheba didn't allow herself enough time between them maybe. And Toby wasn't weaned, and Blackie was, and Blackie tried to nurse on her when that baby died, and she wouldn't let him do it. What color was the dead female? Did you get to see it at all? Mary asked. I just remember them putting it in the hole, and it looked brown. It just looked brown. I didn't see any facial features, face, hands, or anything like that. Can you give me an estimation of what the size was? Janice replies, maybe that big? I don't know. That appears to be approximately 3 foot long, Mary says. Well, they're long, but they're small, just long, Janice says. They're thinner, and they've got a thinner look to them, sort of skinny looking. Okay, so I guess we need to finish with the babies of Sheba, Mary says. Janice replies, okay, in 1981, Sheba had another one, because she had one in the same year as Amanda was born in. Sheba had a female then. Now this female went missing after she was about 5. It's the one that came back later on, and I don't remember what Papa called her. She wasn't friendly, and she would not come to you. She was very standoffish. I never got to touch her or anything. Had you touched all of the others up until then? Mary asked. Yes, Janice replied. I've touched them. She went missing when me and Mama were having an argument over Doodlebug. And how long was she gone? Mary asked. She was gone until 1992. She was the one that got her fingers cut off in the next-door neighbor's conveyor belt. Well, she got 2 cut off. She was left-handed, because she got the 2 fingers sliced off in Henry's conveyor belt. It lifted hay up into the barn. Besides, she was very distinctive and different. What color was she? We didn't get what color she was, Mary says. She was brown, a reddish brown. With the sun on her, she had that red highlight, like a mahogany. Do you think there was ever any interbreeding between them? Mary asked. No, Janice replied. I never saw them interbreed, and Sheba had one more after that I can remember. Okay, and how old did it look when you first saw this baby? Mary asked. It looked to be 4 or 5 months old, and it was a tannish color like Toby. Could you tell if it was a male or a female? Janice replies. It was a female. And did that one stay on the farm also? Mary asked. It was there until Grandpa died in 1996. Mary then asked, and it did not go off. No, it never went off. Mary then asked Janice, just your opinion here, but do you think they have trouble finding mates? I don't know, because Jim brought that up, and he may have put this in my head, so maybe I shouldn't comment on what he told me. I think what they did, they would go off with other family members, or when they got to puberty, they go off and find mates. Do you think that the males were ever run off when they become sexually mature? Mary then asked Janice. Blackie was never run off. Toby was run off a couple of times, but he always came back. I think that the females went off because there was other males. There was more than one male that would come. The others would come, and I think the females went off with them. But now, I don't know what happened to the one that had her fingers cut off. Her mate, if she had one, because when she came back, she didn't have one. But she did have her young one with her, so I assumed that was her baby. And what color was her baby? Mary asked. Janice replies, it was brown, about the same color as her. So really, Fox was the blackest one out of the bunch, wasn't he? Mary says. Fox was just black and blue-eyed, Janice replied. The rest of them had brown eyes or charcoal dark colored eyes. Oh, and did you know what sex this last baby was of the last female? Mary says. Janice replies, no. She wouldn't get close enough, and you just couldn't tell. Finishing with Sheba's babies, I decided to ask a few questions that I had been wondering about since the beginning of the interview. Did the males ever fight? Toby and Blackie fought all the time, Janice replied. Okay, and what did they do to each other? Punch, hit, bite, and tumble with each other, or what I call tumbling, Janice says. Mary then asked, was this serious fighting or just play? Oh, one time it was serious, Janice replies, because Blackie bit Toby's ear on off. They do have ears, but you don't really see them. Do their ears look like human ears, and are they hairy? I just thought of that. Do they have hair on their ears? Mary continued. Janice replies, yeah, and Sheba, her hair would be like this. Janice allows her long, thick hair to fall down in front of her face. She hangs her head forward a bit, pushing her shoulders up, and then she would take her hair and pull it back. Now it was more down on her, more so than it is on the males. She would take it and pull it back over the top of that ear. Now there'd be hair in front, but that ear would stick out like an elephant's ear. You know, but it was human-shaped, and there was no hair on her ear. I don't think there was any hair on the male's ears, but the only time I had ever seen one was the time that Blackie bit Toby. It was Sheba that swatted Blackie on the butt, so it was Blackie that had to have bit Toby. It was the only time I had ever seen her like, just a person. Sheba had a hold of his arm, and she went. Janice demonstrates a typical human spanking a child on the bottom, doing so by holding a child with one hand and smacking its bottom with the other. Just like a person would do. You know, like you were going to whip a kid. She smacked it on the butt. By now, it was glaringly evident that there were unmistakable human characteristics displayed by the Bigfoot. It struck me then, and it does now, that I was hearing a lot of evidence that suggested that the Bigfoot on the Carter's farm acted more like giant, super strong, albeit hairy, humanoids than some form of great ape. They lived as a family unit. The females sometimes left with the other males from other families. They buried their dead, just like we humans do. No ape in history has ever buried its dead that I know about. Are the humanoids living on the Carter's farm more in the nature of cousins from our distant past? Why are there no bones found to support this evidence? Is this because they do take care of their own and bury their dead? There would be nothing then, no bones to be found in easily accessible places. With all of their kind buried in deep, unmarked graves, the chances of finding one of their remains would be astronomical indeed. One would have to visually see them burying their dead in order to find the grave, and Janice had already done so, so she may be the only human who has ever watched an unknown species place one of their own deceased in the ground.